Hey guys, tonight we begin with the surprisingly advanced, incredibly durable, and often mysteriously forgotten technology of the Roman Empire. A world where concrete could heal itself, water flowed uphill, and machines performed calculations that wouldn't be seen again until the 19th century. A civilization that built systems so robust that their ruins are still more functional than some modern infrastructure. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine the air is warm, dry, carrying the scent of pine and heated stone. The sun is high, a brilliant white disk in a hard blue sky, but you're standing in the cool shadow of a massive arch. The stone under your hand is rough, warm from the day, vibrating slightly with the distant rumble of carts and the flow of water. You can hear the sound of liquid rushing, a constant soothing gurgle that seems to come from the walls themselves. It smells of wet limestone and the faint metallic tang of bronze pipes. Your breath is slow, relaxed, matching the steady rhythm of the city that breathes around you. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 117 AD. The good news, you're alive in the height of the Pax Romana. The bad news, you're looking at a machine that you won't understand for another 1-800 years. In the modern world, we think of technology as silicon chips, electricity, and the internet. We think of progress as a straight line, moving from primitive to advanced. But the Roman world proves that progress is not linear. It is a cycle of invention, loss, and rediscovery. You're standing in front of the Antiquity mechanism, or something like it. To you, it looks like a box. A wooden case, perhaps a foot tall with bronze dials on the front. It sits on a table in a wealthy merchant's villa, or perhaps in the study of a philosopher in Rhodes. The sensory reality of this object is precision. You turn a small crank on the side, click, whir click. The sound is delicate, intricate. Inside, dozens of tiny hand-cut bronze gears are meshing together. As you turn the handle, the dials move. One dial shows the position of the sun, another shows the moon, a third shows the planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, moving in their erratic retrograde loops. A fourth dial predicts the next eclipse. You're holding an analog computer. It is a mechanical cosmos. It calculates the movements of the heavens with a mathematical accuracy that defies belief. It accounts for the elliptical orbit of the moon, which shouldn't have been understood yet. It accounts for the leap year. If you opened it up, you would see a differential gear, a gear that allows two shafts to spin at different speeds. This technology disappears. When Rome falls, the knowledge of how to cut these gears, how to calculate these ratios vanishes. It doesn't appear again until the clockmakers of the Renaissance, and the differential gear doesn't reappear until the Industrial Revolution. You're looking at a ghost from the future, living in the past. But the Antiquity mechanism was a toy for the rich. The real technological miracle of Rome was something much heavier, something you are standing on right now. Concrete. Opus cementitium. You look down at the harbour wall. The waves are crashing against it. Salt spray hits your face, cool and bracing. The water is relentless. It eats stone, it rusts iron. But the Roman concrete, it gets stronger when it touches seawater. The sensory detail is the hardness. You kick the wall. It is solid as a mountain. It doesn't crumble, it doesn't crack. Modern concrete, the stuff we use to build skyscrapers, degrades. It lasts 50, maybe 100 years. It cracks. Steel rebar rusts inside it. It requires constant maintenance. Roman concrete has lasted 2,000 years, and it is still standing. The secret? Volcanic ash. Specifically, ash from Pozzuoli, Pozzolana. When they mixed this ash with lime and seawater, it created a chemical reaction. A mineral called tobermorite grew inside the concrete, and another mineral called philipsite. These crystals grow over time. If a crack forms, the seawater enters. The crystals grow into the crack. They seal it. The concrete heals itself. You're standing on a living rock, a technology that we have only recently begun to understand, let alone replicate. The Romans built piers that are still used today, while our bridges crumble. It was a mastery of chemistry that was lost because people forgot which ash to use. But let's leave the harbour and go to the bathhouse, because the Romans didn't just master stone, they mastered heat. The hypocaust central heating. You walk into the caldarium, the hot room. The air is steamy, smelling of eucalyptus oil and wet marble. The floor is hot under your bare feet, but there is no fire in the room, no smoke, no soot. The heat is coming from under the floor. The sensory reality is the invisible warmth. You lie on the floor. It radiates heat like a sun-baked rock. Below you, in the basement, slaves are stoking a furnace. The hot air flows through hollow spaces under the floor, pili stacks, and up through clay pipes in the walls, tubuli. The walls are warm, the floor is warm, the ceiling is warm. It is radiant heating. It is efficient, clean for the bather, and luxurious. When Rome fell, this technology vanished. People went back to open fires in the centre of the room. They went back to smoke in their eyes and freezing backs. Europe forgot how to be warm for 1,000 years, and as you lie on the warm marble listening to the water drip, in the distance smelling the clean steam, you realise the Roman Empire wasn't just a political entity. It was a machine designed to conquer the environment, but the machine needs fuel and water, and to get water you need the aqueduct, but not just the bridge, the inverted siphon, the aqueduct. You see it stretching across the valley, a line of stone arches marching towards the city like a silent army. It is majestic. But the real genius isn't the bridge. It is what happens when the valley is too deep. If the valley is too steep for arches, the Romans couldn't just build higher. Gravity has limits, so they used the inverted siphon. Imagine the sensory reality. You're standing at the edge of a canyon. The water arrives in a stone channel, but then it enters a header tank. From the tank it drops into lead pipes. 9, 10, maybe 12 thick lead pipes. They plunge down the side of the cliff. You can hear the water rushing inside the metal. A deep, vibrating hum. Thrum. The pipes go down to the bottom of the valley. They cross a low bridge, and then they go up the other side. Physics says water seeks its own level. The Romans knew this. The water rushes down with such force that it pushes itself up the other side to a receiving tank, almost as high as the start. The pressure inside those pipes at the bottom of the valley is immense. Hundreds of pounds per square inch. If a pipe bursts, it explodes like a bomb. The Roman engineers had to calculate the pressure. They had to solder the lead seams perfectly. You touch the pipe. It is cold, sweating with condensation. You feel the power of the river trapped inside a metal skin. It is hydraulic engineering on a scale that wasn't matched until the 19th century. But let's follow the water into the city. To the mill, not the simple watermill, the Barbagal, the industrial complex. In southern France, the Romans built a factory, 16 water wheels arranged in 2, parallel sets of 8, cascading down a steep hill. The water from the aqueduct turned the first wheel, then it fell to the second, then the third. The sensory overload of the Barbagal is the roar, the sound of 16 massive wheels turning, the grinding of 32 millstones, rumble, splash, grind. It produced 4.5 tons of flour a day, enough to feed a city of 12,000 people. It was a factory, a mass production facility. It had gears, power transmission, efficiency. It was the Industrial Revolution 1,700 years early. Why did it stop? Why didn't they build more? Because of slavery. Labour was cheap. Why build a machine when you can force 1,000 men to do it? The Romans had the tech, but they didn't have the economic incentive to scale it. It is a tragedy of economics. But let's leave the noise of the mill and go to the mine. Las Medullas, gold mining in Spain. The Romans didn't just dig with picks. They used hydraulic mining. Ruina Montium, the ruin of mountains. They built aqueducts to bring water to the top of a mountain. They dug tunnels into the mountain. Then they released the water. All at once, the sensory horror. You stand on the opposite ridge. You hear a roar like thunder. The water crashes into the tunnels. The pressure builds. The air compresses. Boom! The mountain explodes. The water pressure blows the rock apart from the inside. The side of the mountain collapses in a landslide of mud and gold ore. It is terraforming by catastrophe. The Romans literally moved mountains with water. The landscape of Las Medullas today still looks like a jagged red wound in the earth. It was environmental destruction on a planetary scale. But let's move from the destruction of the earth to the healing of the body. Roman surgery. We talked about medieval surgery. But Roman surgery was better. They had hemostats, clamps to stop bleeding. They had speculums to open cavities. They had catheters, and they boiled their instruments. They didn't know about germs, but they knew about cleanliness. The sensory detail is the bronze scalpel. You look at the surgeon's kit. It is neat, orderly. The bronze is polished. But the most advanced tool? The eye needle, for cataract surgery. We mentioned the medieval couching, pushing the lens back. The Romans did it too, but they used a hollow needle to suck the cataract out. Suction surgery. In the 1st century, the sensory precision. The doctor holds the needle. He creates a vacuum with his mouth via a tube. He sucks the cloud from your eye. It is delicate, terrifying, and brilliant. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the very entertainment of the masses. The Colosseum, not the fighting, the awning, the velarium. The Colosseum was an open-air arena. The sun in Rome is hot. So the Romans built a retractable roof, a massive canvas awning that covered the seating area. It was rigged with miles of ropes. Who operated it? Sailors from the imperial fleet. The sensory experience is the shadow. You sit in the stands. The sun is beating down. You're sweating. Then a whistle blows. High above, hundreds of sailors pull on ropes. The canvas unfurls, snap, flutter. A cool shadow moves across the crowd. The air temperature drops. You're sitting in the shade watching a gladiator fight under a marvel of textile engineering that rivals a modern stadium roof. And as you sit there, in the cool shade, listening to the roar of the crowd, smelling the perfumed water sprayed by the misters, yes, they had misters, spasiones, you realize the Romans had solved the problem of comfort. They had solved water, they had solved stone, but they couldn't solve the problem of their own decline. But the night is coming, the velarium is retracted, the stars come out, you head home, you walk on the paved road, the Via Appia, straight, flat, durable, you're safe until tomorrow, when the fire engine comes, and it is a pump. Sleep well, the fire engine, Sipho. It is not a red truck with a siren, it is a wooden cart, heavy and awkward, carrying a large bronze double-action pump. The sensory reality of a Roman fire is chaos. The vigiles, the night watchmen and firefighters, are shouting. They form a bucket chain, but the fire is in an upper story of an insular apartment block. The buckets can't reach, so they roll out the Sipho. You stand by the pump. It requires manpower. 2 men on each side of the rocker arm. Heave, push, heave, push. The sound is a rhythmic, mechanical wheezing. The bronze pistons slide in the cylinders. Shh, clack, shh, clack. A leather hose is attached to the nozzle. It stiffens as the pressure builds. A jet of water shoots out. It arcs high into the air, hitting the burning roof. Hiss. Steam rises. It is a continuous stream. The Romans invented a flow that doesn't pulse. They understood air chambers to equalize pressure. But here is the cynical twist. Before the Emperor Augustus created the public vigils, firefighting was private. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, he had his own fire brigade. They would rush to a burning house. They wouldn't spray water. They would stand there. Crassus would approach the owner. "Will you sell me your house?" he would ask. "For a cheap price?" If you said yes, he signed the deed. His men put out the fire. He rebuilt it and rented it back to you. If you said no, he let it burn. You watched your life turn to ash because you refused to sell real estate at a discount during an emergency. It was a fire sale in the most literal sense. But let's leave the smoke and go to the highway. You're renting a carriage, a reader. You want to know how far you have travelled. You don't want the driver to cheat you. Enter the hodometer, the taximeter. Vitruvius described it, a complex box attached to the wheel of the carriage. The sensory detail is the pebble. Every time the wheel turns 400 times, 1 Roman mile, a gear engages. It drops a pebble through a hole into a brass bowl. Clink. You're riding along the Via Appia. You're dozing. But every mile you hear that sound. Clink. At the end of the journey you count the pebbles in the bowl. 10 miles, you say. 10 denarii. It was a mechanical auditor of distance. It ensured honesty through gravity. But if the Romans could measure miles, could they measure thirst? The vending machine. Hero of Alexandria. The Da Vinci of the ancient world. You are entering a temple. You are thirsty. You want holy water. But the priest is busy. You see a bronze machine, it has a slot. You take a coin, a drachma, you drop it in. The sensory experience is the weight. The coin falls onto a small pan inside the machine. The weight of the coin tips a lever. The lever opens a valve. Water flows out of a spout. Cool, clear, holy. You wash your hands. Then the coin slides off the pan. The lever snaps back. The valve closes. The water stops. You have just interacted with the first automated retail device in history. Coin in, product out, no electricity, just balance and gravity. But Hero didn't stop there. He wanted to make the gods move. The automatic doors. You are standing in front of the temple sanctuary. The massive stone doors are closed. The priest lights a fire on the altar outside. The sensory reality is the hiss. You can't hear it, but under the floor, something is happening. The heat from the fire warms the air in a hidden chamber. The air expands. It pushes water from one tank into another bucket. The bucket gets heavy. It pulls a rope. The rope turns a spindle. Slowly, majestically, without a human hand touching them, the massive stone doors groan open. Rumble. The crowd gasps. "A miracle!" they shout. It isn't a miracle. It is pneumatics. Steam power. The priest knows. He's using physics to simulate divinity. But the most delicate machine wasn't for the gods, it was for the table. The automaton. A mechanical servant. Hero designed a robot that could pour wine. It rolled on wheels. It stopped. It poured wine into a cup. It mixed it with water. The sensory detail is the clockwork. You hear the whirring of gears inside the bronze figure. The liquid pours perfectly. It doesn't spill. It was a toy for the ultra-rich, a party trick, but it showed that the Romans understood programming. They could program a machine to perform a sequence of actions. They just used ropes and pegs instead of code. And as you stand there, watching the robot pour wine, hearing the pebble drop in the hodometer, smelling the smoke of the fire engine, and feeling the cool holy water, you realize the Romans had the technology to start the modern world. They had steam power, the Aeolipoli. They had factories. They had computers. Why didn't they? Because they had slaves. Why build a steam engine when a human engine is cheaper? It is the tragedy of economic stifling innovation. But the night is coming. The automatic doors close as the fire dies. You head home. You walk past the insula. It has running water. On the first floor. You live on the top floor. You have to carry your water. The technology is unevenly distributed. You climb the stairs. You are safe. Until tomorrow, when the ship arrives. And it has a turbine. Wait, that's too advanced. An ox-powered paddle wheel. Sleep well. The ox-powered paddle wheel. It sounds like a fever dream, a steampunk fantasy drawn by a madman. But in the 4th century, a Roman writer described a warship called the Liburna. It didn't use wind. It didn't use rowers. It used oxen. The sensory reality is the barnyard on the sea. You're standing on the deck of a warship, but instead of the smell of salt and tar, you smell manure and wet fur. In the center of the ship there is a carousel. 3 oxen are yoked to it. They walk in a circle. Thump, thump. Their movement turns a vertical shaft. Gears mesh. The Romans loved gears. The vertical force becomes horizontal force. On the sides of the ship, massive wooden paddle wheels turn. Splash, churn, splash. The ship moves. It defies the wind. It defies the exhaustion of human rowers. But the oxen, they're confused. They are walking, but the floor is moving. They are seasick. The sound is a chaotic mix of lowing cattle, creaking gears, and churning water. It was an idea so bold, so mechanical, that it almost bridges the gap to the 19th century. But it failed. Why? Because feeding oxen at sea is hard, and if the ship rocks, the oxen fall down. Biology defeated engineering. But if the Romans tried to mechanize the sea, they definitely mechanized the farm. The Gallic reaper. The vallus. You're standing in a wheat field in Gaul, France. It is harvest time. Usually this means a line of men with sickles bending their backs, cutting one stalk at a time. It is slow. It is painful. But look, a machine is coming. It is a wooden box on 2 wheels. It has a row of metal teeth on the front. But the most interesting part? It is being pushed by an ox. The animal is behind the machine. The sensory detail is the rattle. As the machine moves forward, the teeth catch the wheat heads. They snap them off. The stalks are left standing. The grain falls into the box. Click, snap, rattle. 1 man and 1 ox can harvest a field in a day that would take 10 men a week. It is a combine harvester. In the ancient world. Why was it lost? Because when the empire fell, the economy collapsed. The bigger states were broken up. The metal teeth were too expensive to make. The ox was eaten. Europe went back to the sickle, back to the back-breaking labour, for 1,000 years. We forgot how to be lazy. But let's move from the field to the emperor's throne room. Because sometimes technology was too dangerous to exist. The flexible glass. Vitrum flexile. It is a legend, recorded by Pliny the Elder and Petronius, but it speaks to a deep truth about Roman economics. A craftsman comes to the Emperor Tiberius. He holds a glass bowl. Beautiful, translucent. He throws it on the floor. Clang. It doesn't shatter. It dents, like bronze. The sensory shock. Your brain expects the crash of broken glass. Instead, you hear the thud of metal. The craftsman takes a small hammer. He beats the dent out. The glass is smooth again. He expects a reward. He expects gold. Tiberius asks a question. Does anyone else know this secret? No, Caesar, the craftsman says. Only me. Tiberius nods. He orders the man's head cut off. Why? Because if glass doesn't break and if it acts like metal, what happens to the value of gold? What happens to the value of silver? The economy would collapse. The emperor murdered the invention to save the market. It was a suppression of technology by the state. But if they feared glass, they loved fire. Napalm. We call it Greek fire later, but the Romans had incendiary weapons. They mined naphtha, petroleum in the east. The sensory reality is the liquid fire. You're a soldier. You're attacking a fort. You fill a clay pot with naphtha and sulfur. You light a fuse. You throw it. Smash. Whoosh. The fire sticks. It flows like water, but it burns like hell. You cannot put it out with water. Water just spreads it. You have to use sand or vinegar. The smell is chemical, oily, terrifying. It smells of the earth burning. They weaponized fossil fuels 2,000 years before the internal combustion engine. But let's end this section with the most famous, most useless, most brilliant machine of all. The Eolipile, hero of Alexandria again. It is a copper ball, hollow, filled with water. It has 2 bent nozzles sticking out of it. You put a fire under it, the water boils, steam shoots out of the nozzles. Hiss. Ball spins, fast, a blur of copper. It whistles. It is a steam engine, a reaction turbine. If they had connected it to a wheel, to a cart, to a loom, they could have started the Industrial Revolution in 50 AD, but what did they do with it? They put it on a table. They watched it spin. They laughed. How amusing! It was a toy, a curiosity. Why? Because labour was cheap. Slaves were everywhere. Why build a steam engine to do work when you can just buy a person? The tragedy of the Eolipile is the tragedy of a society that valued hierarchy over efficiency. And as you stand there, watching the copper ball spin, hearing the steam hiss, smelling the naphtha, and feeling the dent in the flexible glass, you realise the future was right there, sitting on a table in Alexandria. But no one picked it up. And so, the night comes. The steam engine runs out of water. The spinning stops. You head home. You walk on the mosaic floor. Thousands of tiny stones, cut by hand, arranged into pictures of fish, gods, and geometric patterns. It feels cool under your feet. It is durable. It is beautiful. But it is also a puzzle left for us to solve. You enter your room. You light a tallow candle. The Romans had them, though they preferred oil lamps. You are safe until tomorrow, when we leave Rome and we go to the Vikings and how they crossed the ocean without a compass. Sleep well. The Roman candle flickers and dies. The warm Mediterranean air fades, replaced by a biting wind that smells of salt, ice, and raw pine. The steady stone of the Via Appia dissolves into the heaving, restless surface of the North Atlantic. You're no longer in the Empire. You're in the void. You're standing on the deck of a Viking longship, or perhaps a Nar, the heavy cargo ship. The gunwales are low, terrifyingly close to the water. The sea is a churning grey soup. The sky is a white sheet of fog. You have no compass. The magnetic needle hasn't reached the north. Yet, or at least you don't trust it. You have no map because the ocean changes every second. How do you know where you are? You reach into a pouch at your belt. You pull out a stone. It looks like a piece of rough glass, or a crystal. It is cloudy, yellowish, unremarkable. The sunstone, solstein, Icelandic spar, calcite. The sensory reality of navigation is the glow. You're lost in the fog. You cannot see the sun. Without the sun, you cannot find the latitude. You are blind. You hold the crystal up to the grey sky. You rotate it slowly. This crystal has a property called birefringence. It splits light. As you turn it, you look for a change, a yellow band, a darkening. When the crystal aligns with the polarization of the hidden sunlight, it changes colour. There, you whisper, you point. Even through the dense fog, the rock has found the sun. You know where south is, you know where north is. You're navigating by the physics of light polarization 1,000 years before polarized sunglasses. To the monks you're about to raid, this is sorcery. To you, it is just a rock that knows the truth. But knowing where north is doesn't keep the water out. Let's look at the ship itself. The Roman ships were rigid. They were built like buildings, strong, stiff, nailed together. If a Roman ship hit a big wave, it smashed through it. The Viking ship? It snakes. Clinker built. The planks overlap like the shingles on a roof. They are riveted together with iron. But the frame, the ribs, they are tied to the planks with roots, spruce roots. The sensory experience is the flex. You hit a wave. You feel the entire ship twist under your feet. The deck ripples. The hull bends. It feels like the ship is breaking. It feels like you're standing on the back of a living animal. But this flexibility is the genius. The ship doesn't fight the wave. It rides it. It flows over the water. But the smell. Pine tar. To keep the wood from rotting, the ship is painted with tar, made from burning pine roots in a pit. The smell is thick, resinous, dark. It smells of the deep forest, even in the middle of the ocean. It coats your hands. It coats your clothes. You are sealed in a shell of tree blood. But the most expensive part of the ship isn't the wood, or the iron, or the tar. It is the sail, the wadmal. A Viking sail was made of wool, not canvas. Wool. Imagine the sensory weight. A woolen blanket is heavy. Now imagine a blanket that is 1,000 square feet. And wet. When the spray hits it, the wool absorbs the water. It becomes immensely heavy. But it doesn't rot. The natural lanolin, sheep grease, protects it. But the labour. To make one sail took 2 women 2 years of spinning and weaving. The sensory reality is the cost of wind. You look up at the red and white striped square. You aren't just seeing a propulsion system. You're seeing the entire economic output of a village. Every thread was spun by fingers by a hearth. If the sail tears, it is a tragedy. It is a loss of years. But what do you eat on this wet, twisting, tar-smelling ship? There is no kitchen, no fire, usually. You eat stockfish, dried cod, air-dried in the freezing wind of Norway, until it is as hard as wood. The sensory experience is the gnaw. You take a stick of fish. You can't bite it. You have to beat it with a hammer to break the fibres. Then you chew. It tastes of salt and nothingness. It rehydrates in your mouth, turning into a fibrous paste. It is pure protein. It keeps you alive. But it hurts your jaw. And to drink? Sir. Sour whey. The liquid left over from cheese making. It keeps better than water. It tastes acidic, thin, cheesy. You are traversing the ocean on a diet of fishwood and cheese water. But the most terrifying technology of the Vikings wasn't the ship. It was the sun's shadow board. The gnomon. A wooden disc floating in a bowl of water to keep it level. A pin in the centre. You measure the shadow of the sun at noon. If the shadow is too long, you are too far north, too cold. If the shadow is too short, you are too far south, too hot. If the shadow hits the mark carved on the wood, you are on the latitude, the straight line to home. You're sailing along a line drawn on the water by a shadow, and as you stand there holding the sunstone, feeling the ship twist like a snake, smelling the tar and the wet wool, chewing on your dried fish, you realize the Vikings didn't conquer the sea. They negotiated with it. They built ships that moved like water. They used stones that read the light. They survived because they didn't try to be Romans. They didn't build walls against the ocean. They became part of it. But the fog is lifting. You see a coastline, green cliffs, stone towers. It is Ireland or Scotland. You reach for your axe, but wait. The monks have a technology you want. The glass house, not for plants, for ink. We talked about the scriptorium, but let's look at the inkhorn, the sensory detail. The monk has a cow's horn tied to his belt. Inside, the black oak gall ink. He dips his quill, but the ink freezes in the winter, so he has a heating stone, a warm stone from the fire placed on the desk. He rests the inkhorn on it. He is keeping the word of God liquid with a hot rock. But let's leave the Vikings and the monks and go to the desert, because while the north was freezing, the Middle East was inventing the air conditioner, the wind catcher, bad gear. You are standing in a house in Persia, Iran. Outside it is 120 degrees. The sun is a hammer, but inside it is cool. There is a breeze. How? You look up. On the roof there is a tall chimney with vents. The wind hits the vents. It is forced down the chimney. The sensory reality is the draft. The hot air is caught, pushed down a shaft. At the bottom of the shaft there is a pool of water, or wet straw. The air hits the water. It's the evaporation. The air cools down. It flows into the room. You're standing in a natural air conditioning system. No electricity, no fans, just geometry and water. The Xianat, the underground water channel. The wind catcher pulls air up from the Xianat. The air has travelled underground for miles, cooled by the earth and the water. It enters the basement. It is 60 degrees. You're sitting in the desert, shivering. It was a mastery of airflow that modern architects are still trying to relearn, and as you stand there, feeling the cool breeze of the Badgir, listening to the drip of the Kanat, smelling the desert dust, you realise ancient technology wasn't primitive. It was elegant. It used the forces of nature, the wind, the sun, the evaporation, instead of fighting them. But the night is coming. The desert cools down, the wind stops, you head home, you walk on a carpet, a Persian rug, but not just a rug, a garden. The patterns on the rug, the flowers, the fountains, the trees are a map of a garden. When you sit on the rug, you're sitting in a portable paradise. The sensory texture, the wool, the silk, the knots, millions of knots tied by hand. It is a technology of comfort. You lie down, you're safe until tomorrow. When we go to the castle, and we see how they kept the garderobe from smelling, spoiler, they didn't. Sleep well. The wind from the Persian desert has faded, and the cool water of the Kanat is a memory. You open your eyes, the air is damp, heavy, and smells of cold stone and ammonia. You're sitting in a garderobe. In the modern world, a wardrobe is a place for clothes. In the medieval castle, the garderobe is a toilet. It is a small stone chamber protruding from the castle wall, suspended over the moat or a cesspit far below. The sensory reality is the draught. The wind blows up the chute. It is an inverted chimney of cold air and foul smells. You sit on the wooden bench, shivering, listening to the wind, to whistle through the hole. But look around you. The room is full of clothes, rich velvet cloaks, woolen tunics, silk doublets. They are hanging on pegs, right next to the toilet. Why? Because of the moth. The medievals believed, correctly, that the sharp, stinging fumes of ammonia rising from the waste pit killed fleas, moths and larvae. So, the toilet was the dry cleaner. You're wearing a coat that smells of the latrine, but it has no holes. It is a trade-off. You smell like a sewer, but you look like a king. But let's leave the cold stone seat and go to the great hall, the heart of the castle. It is supposed to be grand, feasts, fire, music, but the sensory reality is the chill. Stone walls suck heat. They radiate cold. The fireplace is huge. You could park a cart inside it, but the heat goes straight up the chimney. So, they invented the tapestry. We think of tapestries as art, pretty pictures of unicorns and hunts, but they were insulation. They hung. The tapestry is a few inches away from the cold stone wall. This created an air gap, a pocket of dead air that trapped the heat. The sensory detail is the ripple. You're sitting at the high table. A draught blows through the cracks in the masonry. The tapestry moves. The unicorn ripples. The hunter sways. It looks like there are ghosts behind the fabric, and often there were. Polonius behind the arras. The space behind the tapestry was the perfect place for a spy, or an assassin, or a lover. You watch the fabric move. Is it the wind, or is it the whisperer? You pull your cloak tighter. The castle is a machine for paranoia, but if the walls were cold, the stairs were treacherous. The spiral staircase, you're climbing a tower, the stairs wind upwards, but notice the direction, clockwise. Why? To defend against the sword hand. Most people are right-handed. If you're attacking up the stairs, your sword arm is blocked by the central pillar, you cannot swing, but the defender coming down. His sword arm is on the outside wall. He has free room to swing. The sensory experience is the cramp. You are the attacker. You are squeezed against the newel post. You are trying to jab with your sword, but the stone is in the way. The defender swings down, clang. It is architecture weaponized against biology. Unless you were the Kerr family in Scotland, they were left-handed. They built anti-clockwise stairs. Kerr-handed. A staircase designed for a sinister advantage. But let's go higher, to the roof, the hoarding. In peace, the battlements are stone crenellations. But in war, they built wooden corridors that hung over the edge of the wall. Machicolations, holes in the floor, the sensory horror. You're an attacker standing at the base of the wall. You look up, you see the wooden floor projecting above you. A trapdoor opens. You expect boiling oil. Rare, oil was expensive. You expect boiling water, hard to heat. What do you get? Quicklime, calcium oxide, powder. It falls like snow. It gets in your eyes. It gets in your sweat. It burns. It blinds. Or you get sand. Red-hot sand. Heated in a cauldron. It falls. It finds the gaps in your armor. It works its way under the metal plates. It burns your skin. You cannot get it out. You are dancing in agony, tearing at your armor, while the defenders watch from above through the murder holes. It was a weapon of granular torture. But if the castle was a defense, the trebuchet was the answer, the counterweight. The Romans had catapults, tension. The medieval engineers used gravity. The sensory reality of the trebuchet is the creak, a massive wooden arm. On one end, a box filled with 10 tons of rocks, the counterweight. On the other end, a sling. You use a winch to pull the arm down. The wood groans, the ropes stretch. The tension is terrifying. If the pin slips, you are crushed. You load the stone, or the dead horse, or the beehive. Biological warfare. Loose. The weight drops. Whoosh. The arm swings up. The sling whips around. The projectile is launched. It flies silently, a dark arc against the sky. Crash. The stone hits the wall. The wall shatters. It is the power of gravity, harvested and directed. But let's move from the macro to the micro, from the stone crusher to the metal cutter. Damascus steel. Wootz steel. You are a crusader. You have a heavy iron sword. It is strong, but it is dull. It breaks. You meet a Saracen warrior. He has a curved blade. It has a pattern on it. Ripples, like water flowing over rocks. The watered steel. The sensory detail is the cut. He drops a silk handkerchief on his blade. The silk falls. It parts. The blade cuts it by gravity alone. Your sword would just crumple the silk. How? Nanotubes. We didn't discover carbon nanotubes until the 20th century, but the smiths of Damascus, using steel from India, were making them in the 12th century. They added organic material, leaves, wood, in the crucible. The carbon formed microscopic tubes. It made the steel incredibly hard but flexible. The secret was lost, for centuries, because the mines in India ran out of the specific ore with the right impurities, vanadium. We forgot how to make the best metal in the world because we ran out of the secret ingredient we didn't know we were using. But let's end this section with a technology that didn't kill, but remembered. The tally stick again. But the exchequer. The sheer volume of them. The sensory reality is the archive. You walk into the basement of the palace. It is filled with sticks, millions of willow twigs. They are the memory of the kingdom, but they are wood. Wood rots, wood burns. We mentioned the fire, but the rot. The worm again. The woodworm. The history of the economy is being eaten by insects. The clerk listens. Scritch, scratch. He hears the worms eating the tax records. He smiles. And as you stand there, smelling the moth-proof ammonia of your cloak, feeling the warmth of the tapestry gap, hearing the creak of the trebuchet, and watching the worm eat the debt, you realize the past is fragile. It is built of wood and cloth and memory. But the night is coming. The drawbridge is raised. The portcullis, the heavy iron grate, drops with a clang. You are locked in, or locked out. The watchman blows his horn. You find a corner in the hayloft. You wrap yourself in your clean cloak. You're safe until tomorrow, when we go to the scriptorium and we find out why the books are chained to the shelves and what happens if you steal one. Hint, it involves a curse. Sleep well. The scriptorium is silent, not the peaceful silence of a meadow, but the heavy, disciplined silence of a room where speaking is forbidden. The air is freezing. Fires are banned here. One spark could destroy 1,000 years of knowledge. So the monks work in the cold, their fingers stiff, wrapped in fingerless wool gloves. You walk down the aisle of desks. The smell is distinct. Oak gall ink, acidic and metallic, old parchment, dried skin, and beeswax, polish. But as you reach for a book, you are stopped. Not by a monk, by iron, the chained library. Every book is attached to the shelf by a heavy iron chain. It is riveted to the wooden cover. The chain is just long enough to allow you to lift the book to the lectern, but not an inch further. The sensory reality is the rattle. You pull the book, clank, clank, clank. The chain drags across the wood. It is heavy. It reminds you that this object is not just a container of words, it is a treasure. A single book costs as much as a herd of cows. A library is a bank vault. You open the book. The vellum is thick, creamy, slightly oily to the touch. But look at the first page. Before the "in the beginning," there is a warning. The book curse. Medieval anti-theft software. For him that stealeth, or borroweth and returneth not this book from its owner, let it change into a serpent in his hand and rend him. Let him be struck with palsy, and all his members blasted. Let him languish in pain, crying aloud for mercy, and let there be no surcease to his agony till he sink in dissolution. Let bookworms gnaw his entrails. The sensory horror. You read the curse. You imagine the book turning into a snake. You imagine the worms in your stomach. It was psychological warfare. They didn't have security cameras, they had the threat of eternal biological torture. But sometimes the threat wasn't theft. It was overwrite. The palimpsest. We touched on this before, but in the context of lost tech, it is a tragedy. The monks needed parchment. It was expensive, so they took old books, pagan books, and scraped them clean to write prayers, the Archimedes palimpsest. A monk in the 13th century took a copy of Archimedes' mathematical treatises. He scraped off the calculus. He scraped off the method of mechanical theorems, math that wouldn't be rediscovered for centuries, and he wrote a prayer book over it. The sensory experience is the ghost. You look at the page, you see the black ink of the prayer, but underneath faintly, in a rusty red colour, you see the Greek letters running perpendicularly. The ghost of a steam engine, or a calculus formula, trapped under a psalm. We lost the future to save the parchment, but if the monks were erasing the past, they were also inventing the future of vision, the reading stone, lapis ad legendum. You're an old monk, your eyes are failing. You can no longer see the tiny script. In the past, you would have been put out to pasture, but now you have a rock, a piece of rock crystal, quartz, or beryl, ground into a smooth half-sphere. You place it on the page. The sensory detail is the magnification. The letters jump up at you. They are big, clear, distorted at the edges but readable in the centre. You slide the stone across the line. It is the grandfather of eyeglasses. The first time humanity used physics to correct biology. And soon they figured out how to put it in frames. Spectacles. The sensory reality of early glasses. They pinched your nose. No arms yet. They were made of bone or leather. You had to balance them. But suddenly, the world was sharp again. It extended the working life of a scholar by 20 years. It doubled the intellectual output of Europe. But let's leave the quiet of the library and go to the construction site. Because the medieval engineers were building something that defied gravity. The flying buttress. You stand at the base of a Gothic cathedral. It is a mountain of stone. But it looks impossible. The walls are mostly glass, stained glass. How does it stand up? If you built a wall that high with that many holes, it would collapse outward. The weight of the roof would push the walls apart, so they built the exoskeleton. The flying buttress is a stone arch that stands outside the building. It leans against the wall, it pushes back. The sensory experience is the tension. You put your hand on the stone of the buttress. It feels cold, solid. but it is under immense stress. It is catching the weight of the roof and channeling it into the ground. It allows the walls to dissolve into light. Without the buttress, the cathedral is a dark fortress. With it, it is a lantern of God. But how did they lift those stones? The treadmill crane, we mentioned it, but the Lewis, a metal lifting device. You are a mason. You have a 2-ton block of limestone. You cannot tie a rope around it. It would slip. You drill a hole in the top, a dovetailed hole, wider at the bottom. You insert the Lewis. 3 metal pieces. You spread them out. When you pull up, the metal bites into the stone. The harder you pull, the tighter it grips. The sensory reality. You watch the stone lift into the air. It hangs by a single iron pin. It spins slowly. If the stone cracks, death. But the grip holds. It is friction and geometry doing the work of 100 men. But let's end this section with a technology that changed the sound of the world, the mechanical clock. Before this, time was fluid. It was canonical hours, dawn, noon, sunset. The length of an hour changed with the seasons, but the clock didn't care about the sun, the escapement, tick, tock, the verge and Folliot mechanism. It chopped time into equal mechanical slices, the sensory experience of the first town clock. You are in the square, you hear the bell strike. It isn't a call to prayer, it is a statement of fact. It is 2 p.m. Not, it is afternoon. It is 2 p.m. Suddenly you can be late, you can be early. Time has become a quantity. It disciplined the city. It synchronized the market. It prepared the world for the factory. And as you stand there, listening to the iron heartbeat of the clock, looking through the reading stone at the ghost text of Archimedes, feeling the tension of the flying buttress, you realize the Dark Ages weren't dark. They were just lit by a different kind of fire. But the night is coming. The clock strikes the hour of curfew. You head home. You pass the alchemist's shop. He's working on something new. Aquavitae, distilled wine, brandy, the water of life. It burns, it preserves. You enter your house, you bar the door, you're safe until tomorrow. When we go to the east, to the house of wisdom, and the automata of Al-Jazari, the robot band. Sleep well. The water of life burns in your throat, but the wind from the east is bringing something far more potent, knowledge. While Europe was scraping parchment and shivering in stone castles, the Islamic Golden Age was building machines that looked like magic. You're standing in the court of the Caliph in Baghdad, or perhaps in the palace of the Artukid kings in Diyarbakir. The air smells of jasmine, orange blossom and hot metal. The sun is dazzling, reflecting off the white marble and the blue tiles. You are looking at a peacock fountain. It is a bronze statue of a peacock. You need to wash your hands for prayer. You tap the peacock's beak. Click. Whir. Water flows from the beak. As the water fills the basin, a small float rises. It triggers a lever. A little door in the peacock's chest opens. A mechanical servant, a tiny bronze man, extends a hand holding a container of soap, alkali powder. You wash. As the water drains, another float drops. A second door opens. Another servant offers you a towel. It is an automated wash basin, hydro-powered robotics. This was the work of Ismail al-Jazari, the father of robotics. He didn't just make fountains, he made a robot band. The sensory reality is the music. You're at a royal party. A boat floats on the lake. Inside the boat are 4 mechanical musicians, a drummer, a harpist, flautist. Water flows into a tank in the hull. It tips buckets. The buckets turn cams. The cams hit levers. The levers move the arms of the drummers. Bang, tap, bang. The rhythm is perfect. You can change the rhythm by moving the pegs on the cam. It is a programmable drum machine in the year 1206. It was entertainment, yes. But it was also a demonstration of the mastery of fluids and mechanics. But let's leave the palace and go to the hospital, the Bimaristan. While European hospitals were places to die, the Bimaristan was a place to heal. They had flowing water in every ward, to cool the air, to soothe the mind. They had music therapy. The sensory detail is the oud. A musician sits in the mental health ward. He plays soft, complex scales, maqam. The doctors believed that vibrations could realign the soul, and they had distillation. We mentioned aquavitae, but the Arab chemists perfected the alembic. The sensory experience is the drop. You watch the glass vessel. The rose petals boil, the steam rises, it cools in the coil, it drips into the flask. Attar of roses, a scent so concentrated that a single drop can perfume a room for a week. They distilled alcohol, not for drinking, but for medicine, for cleaning wounds, antiseptic. But the most revolutionary technology wasn't the robot or the rose. It was the paper mill. They learned it from the Chinese, Battle of Talas. But they industrialized it. Water-powered trip hammers pounding the rags. The sensory reality is the sheet. In Europe, parchment was thick, heavy, expensive. In Baghdad, paper was light, smooth, cheap. You could buy a book for the price of a meal. This created the stationer's market, a street lined with hundreds of bookshops, the smell of ink and paper dust, the sound of scholars arguing. It was the internet of the 9th century. But let's move to a technology that changed the very landscape. The Noria, the water wheel of Hema. You stand by the river Orontes, you see a wheel. It is massive, 60 feet tall, wooden. The sensory detail is the groan. The wheel turns with the current. Creak, groan, splash. It lifts water in wooden boxes. At the top the boxes tip. The water pours into an aqueduct. It lifts the river into the sky to water the gardens. The sound of the Noria is the heartbeat of the city. It never stops. It sings the song of irrigation. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the stars. The astrolabe. We mentioned it. But the universal astrolabe of Al-Zakali. It was a brass computer. You could hold it in your hand. The sensory experience is the slide. The brass plates are engraved with star maps. They are smooth, cool. You rotate the reet, the web of stars, over the meta, the plate. You align it with the sun. It tells you the time, the direction of Mecca, the height of a mountain, the depth of a well. It was a smartphone made of metal. And as you stand there, holding the astrolabe, listening to the robot band, smelling the attar of roses, and feeling the spray of the Noria, you realize the golden age was golden because it flowed. Water, knowledge, music. Nothing was stagnant, but the night is coming. The desert wind picks up, you head home, you walk on the paved street as Baghdad was paved and lit. You enter your house, you drink sherbet, cooled with ice brought from the mountains. You're safe until tomorrow, when we go to the New World and the roads of the Inca and the chinampas of the Aztecs. Sleep well. The sherbet has melted, leaving a sweet, sticky residue in your cup. The desert wind has died down, but now the air changes again. It becomes thin, crisp, and lacking in oxygen. You're standing on top of the world, the Andes, the Chapacñan, the Great Inca Road. It is 25,000 miles of paved highway, stretching from Colombia to Chile. It crosses deserts, jungles, and peaks higher than any European mountain. But the sensory reality is the steps. The Inca didn't have the wheel for transport. They had llamas, and llamas can climb stairs. So the road isn't a ramp. It is a staircase cut into the living rock of the mountain. You are a chasqui, a runner. You wear sandals made of woven grass. You carry a pututu, conch shell trumpet, to announce your arrival. And you carry a quipu. The quipu is the technology. It is a bundle of strings, wool or cotton, knotted. To the Spanish it looked like a tangled mess. To you it is a spreadsheet. The knots record taxes, census data, crop yields, historical events. The sensory detail is the touch. You run your fingers over the knots. A figure-8 knot means 1. A long knot means 2 through 9. The position of the knot tells you if it is ones, tens, or hundreds. The colour of the string tells you what is being counted. Yellow for gold, red for warriors. You're reading data with your fingertips while running at 10,000 feet. You hand the quipu to the next runner at the Tambo relay station. He takes it and runs. A message can travel from Cusco to Quito in a week. Faster than the Roman post. Faster than the Pony Express. But if the road was impressive, the bridge was terrifying. The Quesuchaca, the grass bridge. You stand at the edge of a canyon. The river Apurimac roars hundreds of feet below. Spanning the gap is a bridge made entirely of grass. Ichu grass. The women braid the grass into small ropes. The men braid the small ropes into massive cables as thick as a man's thigh. They stretch the cables across the canyon. They weave a floor. The sensory experience is the sway. You step onto the bridge. It bounces. It swings in the wind. The grass smells sweet, dry, like hay. You can see the river through the gaps in the floor. Every year, the bridge rots. Every year, the community gathers to cut the grass and rebuild it. It is ephemeral infrastructure. It only exists because the community wills it to exist. But let's leave the mountains and go to the valley, to the terrace, the Andes. The Inca cut the mountains into steps. They built stone walls to hold the soil, but the genius was the microclimate. The stone walls absorbed the sun during the day and released it at night. This stopped the frost. They could grow corn at altitudes where corn should die. They also used guano, bird poop from the coast. They carried it up the mountains to fertilize the soil. But the most advanced agricultural tech wasn't in the Andes. It was in the swamps of Mexico, the chinampas, the floating gardens of the Aztecs. Tenochtitlan, Mexico City, was built on a lake. Land was scarce, so they built land. They wove mats of reeds. They piled mud and rotting vegetation on top. They planted willow trees at the corners to root the island to the lake bottom. The sensory reality is the fertility. You're standing on a rectangle of earth floating in the water. The soil is black, rich, steaming with decomposition. The plants grow incredibly fast. 7 harvests a year. You water the crops by splashing the lake water onto them with a paddle. You're farming on a raft, but the water surrounding you, it is managed. The dike of Nezahualcoyotl, a 10-mile-long dam separating the fresh water from the salt water of the lake. It had sluice gates to control the water level. It protected the city from floods and kept the drinking water sweet. The sensory detail is the taste. You drink the water from the aqueduct, Chapultepec. It is fresh. But just a mile away, the lake is briny. The Aztecs engineered the salinity of an ecosystem. But let's end this section with a tool that was sharper than steel. Obsidian, the macuahuitl, the Aztec sword. It was a wooden paddle embedded with razor-sharp blades of volcanic glass, the sensory horror. Obsidian can be honed to a molecule's width, sharper than a surgical scalpel. Warrior could cut the head off a horse with one swing. But it was brittle. If it hit steel armor, it shattered. The sound of shattering glass on the battlefield. Tink. It was the sharpest technology on Earth, but also the most fragile. And as you stand there, holding the obsidian blade, feeling the sway of the grass bridge, reading the knots of the quipu and smelling the black earth of the chinampa, you realize the new world wasn't primitive. It was a different branch of the tech tree. They chose fiber over iron. They chose biology over mechanics. But the night is coming. The chasqui blows his conch shell. Hoo. You head home. You walk on the stone road. You enter your house. You eat a potato, freeze-dried, chuño. You're safe until tomorrow, when we return to Europe, and the Black Death forces a technological revolution, the labour-saving device. Sleep well. The Black Death has passed. The dead are buried, mostly. The villages are empty, but in the silence of the aftermath you hear a new sound. Click, whir, thump. It is the sound of the labour-saving device. Before the plague, labour was cheap. Why build a machine when you can hire a peasant for a penny? But now half the peasants are dead. The survivors want higher wages. We talked about the statute of labourers. So the rich invest in technology. The water hammer, we saw it in the fulling mill, but now it is used for iron, the trip hammer. A water wheel lifts a massive iron hammer. It drops on the hot metal. Boom. The sensory reality is the earthquake. The ground shakes for miles around the forge. The smith doesn't have to swing the hammer anymore. He just guides the metal. One man can do the work of 10. But the most important labour-saving device wasn't industrial. It was domestic. The chimney. Before, the fire was in the middle of the room. The smoke filled the house. Now, with fewer people, there is more money per person. Peasants can afford bricks. They build chimneys. The sensory revolution. The smoke goes up. The room is clear. You can breathe. You can see. You can have a second floor. Because the fire is contained, you can put floorboards above it. The hall house becomes the storage house. Privacy is invented. You can go upstairs to sleep. You don't have to sleep with the cow. But if the chimney changed the home, the blast furnace changed the war. We mentioned the iron, but to make cast iron, liquid iron, you need intense heat. The blast furnace used water-powered bellows to pump air into the fire continuously. The sensory detail is the river of fire. The iron melts completely. It flows out of the furnace into a sand mould. The sow and piglets. The main channel is the sow. The smaller moulds are the pigs. Pig iron. You can cast cannons, the bombard, a massive iron gun. It can knock down the castle walls we talked about. The age of the knight is ending. The age of the gunner is beginning. But the gunner needs gunpowder. We talked about the saltpeter men, but the corning, if you just mix the powders, they separate in the barrel. The sulphur sinks, so they wet the powder. They rolled it into grains. Corns. It burned faster. It was 30% more powerful. The sensory experience of corning is the sieve. You push the wet paste through a sieve. It forms grains. You dry them. They rattle in the flask like seeds of death. But let's leave the war and go to the sea again, the caravel. The ship that discovered the world. It had lateen sails. Triangular sails adopted from the Arabs. They allowed the ship to sail against the wind. Tacking. The sensory reality. You're sailing into the wind. The ship leans. The sail is tight. You zigzag. You're no longer a slave to the weather and the sternpost rudder. Instead of a steering oar on the side, which broke in high seas, the rudder was hinged on the back. The pilot stands at the whipstaff, a lever. He can steer a massive ship with one hand. It turned the ocean into a map. But let's end this section with a technology that changed the mind. The spectacles again, but the concave lens. Convex lenses helped old people read, farsightedness, but concave lenses helped young people see the distance, nearsightedness. Myopia. Suddenly the blurry world became sharp. Imagine the sensory revelation. You are a nearsighted artisan. You have never seen the leaves on a tree clearly. You put on the glasses. The world snaps into focus. You see the texture of the bark, the individual shingles on the roof. It was a cure for blindness of the distance. And as you stand there, looking through your new glasses, watching the smoke rise from your new chimney, hearing the thud of the trip hammer, and feeling the rumble of the blast furnace, you realize the plague killed the people, but it birthed the machine. But the night is deep. The curfew rings. You head home. You climb the stairs to your second floor. You sleep in a bed, alone or with your spouse. You are safe until tomorrow, when we go to the future, or rather the Renaissance, and the spring, the coiled spring, the invention of portable power. Sleep well. The coiled spring. It sits on the workbench of a clockmaker in Nuremberg, a tight spiral of tempered steel, tense, angry, waiting to uncoil. It is a revolution in a box. Before the spring, clocks were powered by weights, heavy stones on chains. They had to hang vertically. They had to be stationary. You couldn't put a weight-driven clock in your pocket. But the spring, it stored energy. You wind it up. Click, click, click. You feel the resistance building. You're putting your own muscle power into the metal, and then it releases it, slowly, over 24 hours. The Nuremberg egg. The first pocket watch. The sensory reality is the tick. It is faster than the town clock. Tick, tick, tick. It is a personal heartbeat of time. You carry it in a pouch. You can check the time in the forest, in the dark, in a meeting. Time has become portable. But the spring had a problem. It was strong when fully wound and weak when unwound. The clock ran fast in the morning and slow in the evening. So they invented the fusee, a conical gear. It equalized the torque. It was a piece of mathematical genius carved into brass. But the spring wasn't just for clocks. It was for locks, the wheel lock, the first self-igniting gun. Before this, you needed a match, a burning rope, to fire a musket. If it rained, no fire. If the enemy saw the glow, you were dead. The wheel lock used a spring to spin a serrated steel wheel against a piece of pyrite. Spark, instant fire. It allowed for the pistol, a gun you could hide under your cloak, a gun you could fire with one hand. The sensory experience is the snap. You pull the trigger, the spring releases, the wheel spins, the spark jumps. Bang! It democratized assassination. But let's leave the violence and go to the print shop, the Gutenberg press. We mentioned the paper, but the type. Movable type, metal letters, cast in lead. The sensory detail is the case. The typesetter stands in front of a wooden case with hundreds of compartments. Uppercase, capitals, and lowercase, small letters. He picks the letters. Click, click, click. He builds the line. He inks the type with balls, leather pads stuffed with wool and soaked in ink. He pulls the lever. The screw turns. The platen presses the paper onto the type. Creak. Thump. He peels the paper off. It is wet with ink. It smells of oil and lampblack. He has just printed a page of the Bible. In 10 seconds. It would have taken a monk a week. The cost of books drops by 90%. Ideas spread faster than the plague. Luther's 95 Theses. Copernicus. The witch hammer. The press printed science and it printed madness. But let's move to a technology that changed the view of the self. The mirror again. But the Venetian mirror. Glassmakers in Murano figured out how to make clear glass. Cristallo. And they figured out how to coat it with a tin mercury amalgam that was perfectly reflective. The sensory shock. You look in a Venetian mirror. You see you, not a blurry ghost, not a distorted reflection. You see your pores, your wrinkles, your grey hairs. It changed art. The self-portrait. Artists could see themselves clearly. It changed fashion. People became obsessed with appearance. It changed the ego. The modern individual was born in the reflection of a glass plate. But the glassmakers were prisoners. The Doge of Venice forbade them from leaving the island of Murano. If they left, their families were imprisoned if they didn't return. An assassin was sent. The secret of clear glass was a state secret. But let's end this section with a technology that changed the night. The lantern, not the rushlight. The horn lantern. You take a cow's horn, you boil it, you flatten it, you peel it into thin translucent sheets. You put it in a metal frame. It protects the candle from the wind, the sensory reality. You walk through the storm. The wind howls, the rain lashes, but your light stays lit. A soft, yellow glow through the horn. You can travel at night. You can work at night. You have conquered the darkness with the byproduct of a cow. And as you stand there, holding your horn lantern, checking your pocket watch, reading a printed pamphlet and looking at your reflection in a shard of mirror, you realize the world is speeding up. The medieval stillness is gone. The machine is running. But the night is deep. The curfew rings, ignored by the watch owners. You head home. You pass the pillory. A printer is there. He printed a libel. You pass the stocks, empty. You enter your house. You bar the door. You're safe until tomorrow. When we go to the Industrial Revolution, and the steam engine finally gets a job, sleep well. The steam engine has finally gotten a job, but it isn't in a factory. It is in a mine. Welcome to the Newcomen engine. The year is 1712. The problem is water. The deep mines of Cornwall and Staffordshire are flooding. You can't dig coal if you are underwater. Thomas Newcomen builds a beast. It is a house. Literally. The engine is so big it fills a 3-story building. The sensory reality is the breath. The engine works on atmospheric pressure. Steam fills the cylinder. Then cold water is injected. The steam condenses. It creates a vacuum. The weight of the atmosphere pushes the piston down. Hiss, thump, hiss, thump. It is slow. 12 strokes a minute. It is inefficient. It eats coal like a dragon. But it pumps. Millions of gallons of water. The mine is dry. The coal comes up. The coal feeds the engine. It is a self-feeding cycle of extraction. But if the engine was slow, the flying shuttle was fast. John Kay. Before, a weaver had to throw the shuttle back and forth by hand. The width of the cloth was limited by the length of his arms. The flying shuttle put the shuttle on wheels. You pulled a cord. Zing. It shot across the loom. The sensory detail is the speed. The loom clacks faster. Clack, clack, clack. One weaver can do the work of 2. But now the weavers ran out of thread. The spinners couldn't keep up. The spinning jenny. James Hargreaves. He knocks over a spinning wheel. He sees the spindle still turning. He has an idea. Why 1 spindle? Why not 8? Why not 16? The sensory experience is the whir, a forest of spindles turning at once. One woman can spin 16 threads, but the thread is weak. It breaks. So Richard Arkwright invents the water frame. It uses water power to stretch the cotton. The thread is strong, but the machine is huge. You can't put it in a cottage. You have to build a factory. Cromford Mill. The sensory horror of the early factory, it never stops. The water wheel turns day and night. The workers work in shifts. The bell. You live by the bell. You eat by the bell. You sleep by the bell. The air is filled with cotton fly. Tiny fibres. They get in your lungs. Bisonosis. Brown lung. You are being woven into the machine. But let's leave the mill and go to the canal. The roads are still mud. Turnpikes are expensive. So they dig the cut, the Bridgewater Canal. The sensory reality is the silence. A barge carrying 50 tons of coal moves silently through the countryside. It is pulled by one horse. The water is flat, black, still. They build the Barton Aqueduct. A canal bridge over a river. You are on a boat sailing over another boat. It broke the laws of geography. But the canal had a limit. Speed. The locomotive. Richard Trevithick. The puffing devil. High-pressure steam. The sensory experience is the terror. The engine is on wheels. It moves. It hisses. It shakes the ground. People run away. They think it is a monster. But then, the rocket. George Stephenson. The Rainhill trials. The sensory detail. The crowd watches. The rocket accelerates 30 miles per hour. He will die, they scream. The human body cannot withstand such speed. They thought your blood would boil. They thought your uterus would fly out. But he didn't die. He waved. The world shrank. A journey of days became a journey of hours. But the train needed tracks. The navigator. The men who dug the railways. The sensory reality is the shovel again, but on a massive scale. They moved more earth than the pyramids, with hand tools. They lived in shanty towns. They drank beer for breakfast. They fought. They died in cave-ins. They carved the path for the machine age with their own muscles. But let's move to a technology that targeted the darkness again. Gaslight. William Murdoch. He heated coal in a retort. It released gas. He piped it through tubes. He lit the gas. A bright, steady white flame. The sensory change, the street lights, the factory lights. You can work all night. The night shift becomes possible. The city never sleeps. The stars disappear behind the light pollution. You have conquered the night, but you have lost the sky. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the very air. The smog. Pea supers. The coal smoke mixed with the river fog. The sensory horror. You walk in London. You cannot see your hand in front of your face. The fog is yellow, green, black. It tastes of acid. You tie a handkerchief over your mouth. It turns black in 10 minutes. People walk into the river and drown because they can't see the edge. It was the price of power. The atmosphere itself was industrialized. And as you stand there, coughing in the smog, hearing the train whistle, feeling the vibration of the factory floor, and watching the gas lamp hiss, you realize the world has changed. The old rhythms, the sun, the harvest, the tide are gone. We are living in a machine. But the night is deep. The factory whistle blows. You head home, to your tenement. You enter your room. You light your gas jet. You're safe until tomorrow. When we look at the medical revolution and how we finally figured out that washing your hands is a good idea, eventually, sleep well. The gas jet hisses in your tenement room, casting a harsh, flickering light on the peeling wallpaper, taxed. You cough. The smog has followed you inside. But as you settle into your iron bedstead, bug-proof mostly, you think about the hospital. The medical revolution is coming, but it is arriving slowly, dragged kicking and screaming by men who refuse to believe in invisible enemies. Welcome to the age of sepsis. The year is 1840. Surgery has advanced. We have ether. We have chloroform. The sensory reality of the ether dome. You are the patient. The doctor puts a mask over your face. The smell is sweet, chemical, dizzying. You drift away. The surgeon cuts. You don't scream. A miracle, the students shout. But there is a problem. The surgeon is wearing a frock coat stiff with the blood of 100 patients. He calls it the good old hospital stink. He drops his scalpel on the floor. He picks it up. He keeps cutting. He stitches you up with thread he kept in his buttonhole. You wake up. No pain. 3 days later, you are dead. Ward fever. Enter Ignaz Semmelweis. He works in a maternity ward in Vienna. There are 2 clinics, one run by doctors, one run by midwives. In the doctor's clinic, women die of childbed fever at a rate of 10–30%. In the midwife's clinic, 2%. Why? The sensory detective story. Semmelweis watches. The doctors start their day in the morgue. They dissect corpses. The sensory horror. They are elbow deep in rotting flesh. The smell of cadaverous particles clings to their hands. They wipe their hands. On a rag, they go upstairs. They deliver babies. They are carrying death on their fingertips. The midwives. They don't do autopsies. Semmelweis has an idea. Wash your hands with chlorinated lime. The sensory experience. The doctors hate it. The chlorine smells like bleach. It stings their hands. It takes time, but the death rate drops to 1%. Does the medical establishment celebrate him? No. They are offended. Gentlemen's hands are not dirty, they say. They fire him. He dies in an asylum, beaten by guards. It took another 30 years for Joseph Lister to spray carbolic acid on a wound and prove germs existed. The sensory reality of Lister's surgery. A machine sprays a fine mist of acid over the patient, the doctor, the nurses. It burns the eyes. It cracks the skin. The room smells like a chemical factory, but the patient lives. We sterilized the world with acid to save it. But if surgery was getting cleaner, the water was still dirty. The Broad Street. Pump. London, 1854. Cholera. People are dying in Soho. Hundreds in a week. Jon Snow, not the Game of Thrones one, looks at a map. He marks the deaths. They cluster around one pump. The sensory detail is the taste. People loved that pump. The water was cold, carbonated. Why was it carbonated? Because a cesspit was leaking into it. The bubbles were gas from decomposing waste. Snow removes the handle of the pump. The outbreak stops. He proved that water carried disease, but people still didn't believe him. They liked the miasma theory. Smells were scary. Invisible germs were boring. It took the great stink of 1858 to change their minds. The sensory apocalypse. A hot summer. The Thames River is full of sewage. The smell is so bad that Parliament hangs sheets soaked in chloride of lime over the windows. They consider moving to Oxford. Finally, they build the sewers. Joseph Bazalgette. The sensory triumph. Brick tunnels. Miles of them. They intercept the sewage. They carry it away. The river clears. The smell fades. The cholera vanishes. We conquered death with plumbing. But let's leave the city and go to the farm again. The seed drill. Jethro Tull. Before, you scattered seeds by hand. Broadcast. Birds ate half. The drill planted seeds in rows, at the right depth, the sensory order. You look at the field. Straight lines of green. Efficiency. But the labourers hated it. Swing riots. They smashed the threshing machines. They saw the machine eating their jobs. But let's move to a technology that changed the very concept of news. The telegraph. The Victorian internet. You are in London. You want to send a message to India. Before, months by ship. Now, the submarine cable, the sensory reality. A copper wire coated in gutta percha, rubber from a tree in Malaysia. It lies on the bottom of the ocean, in the dark, in the cold. You tap a key, click, clack. A spark travels 4,000 miles. In Bombay, a machine clicks. A machine. The world is connected by a thread of copper. But the first cable failed. It broke. It was eaten by shipworms. They tried again and again. The persistence of connection. But let's end this section with a technology that captured reality itself. Photography. The daguerreotype. You sit for a portrait. You have to hold still for minutes. The head clamp. A metal stand behind your neck to keep you from moving. The sensory experience is the frozen smile. You stare at the lens. Your eyes water. You cannot blink. The chemicals, mercury vapor, iodine, silver. The image develops on a copper plate. It is you, a mirror with a memory. For the first time, history has a face, and as you stand there, holding the photograph, smelling the carbolic acid, hearing the telegraph click, and watching the clean water flow from the tap, you realize, we have built a new world, a world of glass, steel, and copper. But the old world is still there. Under the pavement, in the DNA, the night is deep. The gas lamp hisses. You head home. You take the underground, the London Tube, steam trains in tunnels, the sensory hell, smoke, sulphur, darkness. But it is fast. You enter your house. You turn the key. You are safe. Until tomorrow, when we look at the lost technologies again and ask, what did we forget? Sleep well. What did we forget? It is a heavy question. We think of history as a library where every book is saved, but in reality, history is a burning house, and we only saved a few pieces of furniture. You are standing in a museum. Or perhaps a Roman villa in the 4th century? You are holding a cup, the Lycurgus cup. It looks like jade, opaque, green, carved with scenes of a mythical king trapped in vines. It feels cool, solid, heavy. But then you hold it up to the light. You place a candle inside it. The sensory shift is instant. The cup changes colour. The green vanishes. It turns a deep, glowing, translucent red, like a ruby, like blood. How? Nanotechnology. The Roman glassmakers ground gold and silver into dust so fine, 50 nanometers wide, that it changed the way light waves interacted with the glass. They created dichroic glass. They didn't have microscopes. They didn't have particle physics. But they knew the exact ratio of gold to silver to create a quantum effect. And then they forgot. The recipe was lost. For 1600 years, no one knew how to make the red-green cup. We only figured it out in the 1990s using electron microscopes. You are holding a piece of magic that was actually physics, crafted by a man who wiped his hands on a dirty apron. But if we lost the cup, we also lost the plant. Silphium. You're in the city of Cyrene in North Africa. It is the Roman era. The air smells of dust and the sea. You walk into the market, you see a merchant selling a resin. It smells sharp like fennel, but richer, like garlic and flowers. This is silphium. It is the most valuable plant in the world. It is a seasoning. It is a medicine. And crucially, it is a contraceptive. The Romans ate it by the ton. They loved it. They stamped it on their coins. But here is the tragedy. Silphium was wild. It refused to be farmed. If you tried to plant it, it died. It only grew in a narrow strip of land in Cyrene. So they harvested it. And harvested it. The sensory reality of extinction. You are a Roman gourmand. You want the taste of silphium on your lamb. But the price is rising. It costs its weight in silver. And then it is gone. Pliny the Elder writes that the very last stalk of silphium was harvested and sent to the Emperor Nero. What did Nero do? He ate it. He ate the last specimen of a species, a flavour that will never exist again, a scent that is gone from the universe. We ate a plant into oblivion because we couldn't figure out how to farm it. But let's leave the lost flavour and go to the earthquake. China. 132 AD. Zhang Heng. The ground is shaking, but you can't feel it. You are in the capital. The earthquake is 400 miles away. But in the imperial palace there is a machine. The seismoscope. It is a large bronze vessel 6 feet wide. It looks like a jar. On the outside there are 8 dragons facing down. Below each dragon is a bronze toad with its mouth open. Inside the vessel, a pendulum. A mechanism so sensitive that we still aren't 100% sure how he balanced it. The sensory detail is the clang. Suddenly, without anyone touching it, one of the dragons drops a bronze ball from its mouth. It falls into the toad's mouth. Gong. The sound rings through the hall. The emperor looks. The dragon facing west has dropped its ball, he says. There is an earthquake in the west. Days later, a messenger arrives on a galloping horse. Disaster in the west, he cries. The machine knew before the man. It was a remote sensing device powered by inertia. But let's move to a technology that wasn't a machine but a soil. Terra preta, the Amazon. Rainforest. European explorers thought the jungle was wild, untamable, poor soil, but beneath the trees they found black earth. The sensory experience. You dig your shovel into the ground. Usually jungle soil is red, clay-like, nutrient-poor. But here it is black, deep black, rich. It smells of charcoal and life. It is engineered soil. The ancient Amazonians mixed charcoal, broken pottery, sherds, bone, and manure. They baked the soil. It regenerates itself. It holds water. It holds nutrients. They terraformed the rainforest. They turned a green desert into a garden that could feed millions. And then disease, brought by Europeans, killed them. The garden grew wild. The cities rotted. We forgot that the jungle was a farm. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the very heat of the sun. The burning mirror, Archimedes, legend says, used mirrors to burn Roman ships at the siege of Syracuse. The death ray. You stand on the wall, you hold a polished bronze shield. 50 men stand with you, you angle the shields. The sensory reality is the focus. The sunlight is blinding. You aim the beam at the sail of the ship. The light concentrates. The canvas smokes. Whoosh, it catches fire. Did it happen? Maybe. The physics works, but the precision. It is a weapon made of geometry and light. And as you stand there, holding the green-red cup, tasting the phantom flavour of silphium, hearing the bronze-toed ring, and feeling the heat of the mirror, you realise, history isn't a ladder, it's a maze. We find things, we lose things, we walk in circles. But the night is deep. The gas lamp is flickering. The Victorian smog is clearing. You head home. You enter your house. You bar the door. You're safe until tomorrow. When we go back to the daily grind, to the water and the great stink, sleep well, the great stink. It is the summer of 1858. London is the capital of the world, the heart of an empire on which the sun never sets. But right now, the sun is setting on a river that smells like death. The River Thames. For centuries it was the city's water source, its highway and its toilet. We talked about the gong farmer emptying the cesspits, but as the population exploded, the pits overflowed, so they connected the drains to the river. The sensory reality of the great stink is the heat. It is unusually hot. The water level drops. The sewage on the banks is exposed to the sun. It ferments. You're walking across Westminster Bridge. You have a handkerchief pressed to your face soaked in lavender or chlorine. It doesn't help. The smell is physical. It has weight. It tastes of rotten eggs, ammonia, and decay. The Parliament is sitting right next to the river. The politicians are choking. They soak their curtains in lime chloride. They rush through legislation. "We must fix the drains," they cry, gagging. Enter Joseph Bazalgette, the engineer. His plan is audacious. He wants to build a new London under the old one. The interceptor sewers, massive brick tunnels that run parallel to the river, catching the waste before it hits the water. The sensory experience of the construction is the brick. They use 318 million bricks. You're a bricklayer. You're deep underground. The air is damp. You're building a cathedral for sewage. The cement is Portland cement, stronger, water-resistant. The pumps are steam engines, massive ornate engines housed in buildings that look like palaces. Crossness Pumping Station. They turn on the pumps, the river clears, the smell fades, the cholera stops. You have built a miracle out of bricks and gravity. You have separated the drinking water from the dying water. But if the water was clean, the food was still suspect. The Victorian adulteration. We talked about medieval bread, but the Victorians industrialised fraud. Tea. You buy a pound of tea. It looks like tea, but it is sloe leaves, or ash leaves, dried, curled, and dyed with Prussian blue, poisonous, or black lead. The sensory reality. You brew a cup, the colour is wrong, it tastes metallic, you get a stomachache. Coffee, mixed with chicory, or burnt beans, or brick dust. Milk, mixed with chalk and water. Pickles, dyed bright green with copper. You're eating a chemistry set. It took the Analytic Sanitary Commission, the Lancet, to expose it. They used microscopes to look at the food. This coffee is 90% chicory. It was the birth of food safety, but for years the poor ate poison because it was cheap. But let's leave the food and go to the light again. The lighthouse. We mentioned the fire, but the lens. The Fresnel lens. Augustin Jean Fresnel. He realised that a thick glass lens absorbs too much light, so he cut the lens into steps, concentric rings. The sensory detail is the beam. You look at the lighthouse, it isn't a dim fire anymore. It is a piercing horizontal beam that cuts through the fog for 20 miles. It is a lighthouse that actually saves ships. But the most dangerous light was radium. Early 20th century, but fits the theme of new tech gone wrong. The radium girls. They painted watch dials with glow-in-the-dark paint. Radium paint. They were told it was safe. It will make you glow. They licked the brushes to point them. The sensory horror. The radium jaw. Their teeth fell out. Their jaws crumbled. Their bones glowed on X-rays. They were literally illuminated from the inside by radiation. It was a tragedy of trust. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the very sound of the voice. The phonograph. Thomas Edison. Or Edward Léon Scott de Martinville. The phonautograph. A hog's bristle attached to a membrane. It scratched a line on soot-covered paper. It recorded sound, but it couldn't play it back. It was a visual representation of a voice. Then Edison. Tinfoil. The sensory experiences. The scratch. You speak into the horn. Mary had a little lamb. The needle vibrates. It indents the foil. You play it back. The voice is tinny, distant, ghostly. It sounds like a spirit trapped in a metal can. But it is your voice, separated from your body. For the first time in history, you can hear the dead speak. And as you stand there, listening to the ghostly voice, seeing the glowing jaw, smelling the clean river, and tasting the chicory coffee, you realize technology solves one problem and creates three more. But the night is deep. The gas lights are hissing. You head home. You pass the workhouse. It is silent. You enter your house. You turn the key. You're safe until tomorrow. When we look at the future of the past, and the things we are building now that will be lost tech in 1,000 years, or maybe just the space pen. Sleep well, the space pen. The Fisher space pen. You have heard the story. NASA spent millions developing a pen that could write in zero gravity. The Russians used a pencil. It's a great story. It's funny. It fits the narrative of simple is better, but it isn't true. Pencils are dangerous in space. The graphite dust floats away. It gets into the electronics. It causes short circuits. The wood is flammable. NASA needed a pen. The sensory reality of the space pen is the pressurized ink. The cartridge is sealed with nitrogen gas. The ink is thixotropic. It is solid until the ballpoint moves, then it turns liquid. You write upside down, you write underwater, you write on grease. It is a masterpiece of fluid dynamics in a metal tube. But let's leave the future and go back to the deep past, to a technology that we still use but have forgotten the magic of: the sewn boat. In the Bronze Age, they didn't have nails, so how did they build ships? They sewed the planks together, with yew withies, twisted branches. The Dover Bronze Age boat. The sensory detail is the stitch. You are a shipwright. You drill holes in the oak planks, you thread the yew branches through, you pull tight. The boat is flexible. It moves with the waves, but it doesn't leak, because you pack the seams with moss. You are knitting a ship, but if the boat was sewn, the sword was folded. Pattern welding. The Vikings and the Japanese. Iron is soft, steel is hard but brittle, so you twist them together. The sensory experience of the forge. You take rods of iron and steel, you heat them, you twist them like taffy, you hammer them flat, you fold them, you hammer again, you create a blade with thousands of layers. When you polish it, the pattern emerges. The serpent in the steel. It looks like damask, it looks like water. It is metallurgy as art. But let's move to a technology that targeted the very air. The punkah. In India, before electricity. A large cloth fan suspended from the ceiling. A cord goes through the wall. Outside, a punkah wallah pulls the cord. Pull, release. He does this for hours, days. The sensory reality. You sit inside. The air moves gently. It is cool. But outside, the wallah is sweating. His arm is a machine. It is cooling, powered by human endurance. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the time. The candle clock, King Alfred the Great. He needed to know the time at night. He took a candle. He marked lines on it. But drafts made it burn unevenly. So he invented the lantern. Wait, we did the horn lantern. He put the candle in a box made of horn. It burned steady. He measured his rain in melted wax. And as you stand there, watching the candle burn down, feeling the breeze from the punkah, hearing the scratch of the space pen, and seeing the pattern in the steel, you realize we are always trying to measure, control, and survive the world. But the night is deep. The fire is low. You head home. You pass the electric streetlight. Arc lamp. It buzzes. It blue-white. Harsh. You enter your house. You turn the switch. You're safe until tomorrow, when we start a new journey into the world of medieval crime, and the sanctuary returns. Sleep well. The sanctuary returns. But this time, it isn't just a knocker on a church door. It is an entire sanctuary city. Durham, Hexham, Beverley. These were towns with grith, peace. If you crossed the boundary, often marked by stone crosses a mile out from the town centre, you are safe. The sensory reality of crossing the sanctuary cross. You are running. The sheriff is behind you. You see the stone cross in the mist. You stumble past it. You stop running. You collapse. The sheriff stops. He reins in his horse. He He glares at you, but he cannot cross the line with his sword drawn. You are safe, but you are trapped. The sanctuary town has its own rules. You have to wear a black robe with a yellow cross. You have to attend mass. You have to pay a fee to the bishop. You are a prisoner of mercy. But what if you committed a crime inside the sanctuary? Then you were cast out. Unsanctuaried. The sensory horror. The bishop strips you of the robe. The gates are opened. The sheriff is waiting. It was a game of tag played with your life. But let's leave the holy city and go to the forest again. The outlaw band. We mentioned Robin Hood, but the reality was the Cotterell gang, or the Folvilles. They were noblemen, younger sons who didn't inherit land. So they turned to crime, they kidnapped judges, they extorted money, they ruled the county, the sensory experience of the kidnap. You are a wealthy merchant, you're riding through Sherwood. Suddenly men in green surround you. They don't look like peasants, they have fine swords. A toll, the leader says, for the king of the woods. You pay. You realise the bandits are better dressed than you. It was organised crime disguised as a romance. But if the forest was lawless, the sea was worse. The pirate. Not the Golden Age pirates, medieval pirates, the Victual Brothers. They started as privateers, hired by the king to fight enemies. But then the war ended. They didn't stop. They captured ships. They held crews for ransom. They even captured entire towns. The sensory reality of a pirate raid. You're in a coastal village. You hear the bell. Clang, clang. You look out to sea. Ships. Dozens of them. They land. They burn. They take the cattle. They take the women. They leave you with nothing but smoke. It was Viking raids, privatized. But let's move to a crime that targeted the very coinage of the realm. Clipping, again. But the sweating. Instead of cutting the edge, you put the coins in a bag. You shook the bag vigorously. The friction wore off gold dust. You took the coins out. They looked worn but whole. You burned the bag to recover the gold. The sensory detail is the shake. The sound of coins rattling. Chink, chink, chink. It sounds like wealth. But it is theft. You are stealing the surface of the money. But the most sophisticated crime was forgery. Specifically, the false charter. Monasteries did it. If they wanted land, they forged a document from a king who died 300 years ago. Look, the abbot says, King Athelstan gave us this field. The parchment looks old. The seal looks real. How? They aged the parchment with smoke. They copied the old handwriting. They used ancient wax, the sensory reality of the scriptorium at night. The monk is forging history. He is creating a lie that will become legal truth. The pen is mightier than the sword, especially when the pen is lying. But let's end this section with a crime that targeted the soul. Simony. Buying a church office. You want to be a bishop? You pay the king. The golden mitre. The sensory experience, the transaction. You hand over a chest of gold. The king hands you the crozier. You are now a holy man, but you bought your holiness. The congregation knows. They see your velvet robes. They smell your expensive incense. They know you are a hireling shepherd. And as you stand there, holding your forged charter, wearing your black sanctuary robe, listening to the pirate bell and shaking your bag of sweating coins, you realise the medieval world was a place where legitimacy was for sale. But the night is deep. The curfew rings. You head home. You pass the pillory. A forger is there. His hand is nailed to the wood. You pass the stocks, empty. You enter your house. You bar the door. You're safe until tomorrow, when the witchfinder comes back, and he has a pricker. Sleep well. The witchfinder stands in the centre of the village square. He holds the pricker. It looks like a simple bodkin, a needle with a wooden handle. But to the medieval mind, it is a diagnostic tool of the highest order. He claims that if he pricks a witch's mark, a mole, a wart, a birthmark, it will not bleed, and it will not hurt. The sensory reality is the trick. Some prickers were retractable. The needle slid back into the handle like a stage dagger. You watch as he approaches an old woman. He presses the needle against her skin. The metal retracts. She feels nothing. No blood appears. A witch, the crowd shouts. He has used a mechanical illusion to condemn a human life. It is technology weaponized against the innocent. But let's leave the superstition of the witchfinder and go back 1,000 years, to a time when the needle was used for logic, not lies. The stylus. The Roman pen. You're standing in the Roman Forum. The noise of the medieval village is gone, replaced by the orderly hum of the empire. You're holding a tabula, a wooden tablet filled with black beeswax. The sensory experience is the scratch. You hold the iron stylus. One end is sharp for writing. The other end is flat like a spatula. You press the sharp end into the wax. Scritch. The wax yields. It smells of honey and soot. You write a message. Meet me at the bathhouse. But then you change your mind. You flip the stylus. You use the flat end. You rub the wax. The warmth of the friction melts the wax slightly. The words disappear. The surface is smooth again. Tabula rasa. Clean slate. You have the power to erase your own history, to edit your thoughts. This was the iPad of antiquity. Reusable, portable, fragile. But if you wanted your words to last, the acta diurna, the daily acts. You walk to a white stone board erected in the forum. It is covered in fresh paint or charcoal. The sensory detail is the crowd. People are gathered around it, reading. The emperor has a cold. The price of grain has dropped. A senator divorced his wife. It is the newspaper, the state-run media. You read it. You know what is happening in Gaul. You know what is happening in Egypt. When Rome fell, this network of information collapsed. The world shrank from an empire to a village. You stopped knowing what happened in the next town, let alone the next continent. We traded the global news for the village gossip, but let's move from the software of Rome, information, to the hardware, the polyspastos, the Roman crane. You're watching a temple being built. The stones are massive, 5 tons, 10 tons. How do they lift them? Not with a ramp like the Egyptians, with a machine, a massive A-frame of timber, ropes, pulleys, and the treadwheel. The sensory reality is the creak. 2 men are walking inside a giant wooden wheel. As they walk, the wheel turns. The rope winds around a drum. The mechanical advantage is 30-1. 2 men can lift 6,000 pounds. You watch the stone rise into the air. It floats. It hovers. The Romans built the Pantheon not just with sweat, but with gear ratios. But the most terrifying application of this math was in war. The Scorpion. Scorpio. A torsion catapult. It didn't use a bent bow like a medieval crossbow. It used torsion, twisted ropes, horsehair, or famously, women's hair. It had the best elasticity. The sensory experience of the Scorpion is the crank. 2 soldiers turn the winches. Click, click, click. They are twisting the skeins of hair tighter and tighter. The tension builds. The frame groans. It stores an immense amount of potential energy. They load a bolt. An iron-tipped arrow, thick as a thumb. Loose. Snap. The sound is like a whip crack, but louder. The bolt flies flat and fast. It can punch through a shield, a man, and the man behind him. It was a sniper rifle made of wood and hair. But let's leave the battlefield and go to the kitchen of the Roman villa, because they had a machine for flavour, the garum factory. We talked about fish sauce, but the industrial scale? In Pompeii, they found vats, huge ones. The sensory reality is the fermentation, layers of fish guts, layers of salt, left in the sun for months. The smell, it was so bad. It was that garum factories were banned from the city centres, but the liquid that dripped out, amber, clear, savoury. Umami. They bottled it in amphorae. They shipped it to Britain, to India. The Romans had a global supply chain for ketchup, but the most advanced technology in the kitchen wasn't the sauce. It was the millennium, the boiler, a bronze tank with a fire inside it, like a samovar. It kept water hot all day. The sensory detail. You want wine, but you want it warm. Romans liked warm spiced wine. You turn a tap on the millennium. Hot water flows out. You mix it with the wine. You have instant hot beverages on tap. When the empire fell, we went back to boiling a pot over a smoky fire. We lost the convenience of the tap. And as you stand there, sipping your hot wine, reading the Acta Diurna, watching the crane lift a temple pillar, and hearing the snap of the scorpion practice, you realize the Romans had solved the friction of life. They smoothed the roads. They heated the water. They moved the heavy weights. They had engineered a life of ease for the lucky few. But the night is deep. The vigils on our fire watch are patrolling. You head home. You walk on the basalt stones of the road. They are polygonal, perfectly fitted, no bumps. You enter your insula. You light an oil lamp. You're safe. Until tomorrow. when we go back to the darkness and the ordeal of the cross. Another trial. Sleep well. The ordeal of the cross. This was not a trial by fire or water, but a trial by endurance. Two litigants, often in a dispute over property or a minor crime, would stand before the altar in the church. They had to hold their arms out horizontally, like a cross. They stood there, in silence. The priest watched. Whoever dropped their arms first, lost. The sensory reality is the burn. You stand with your arms out. For the first minute, it is easy. By the 5th minute, your shoulders ache. By the 20th minute, your muscles are screaming. The lactic acid builds up, your fingers tingle, you start to shake. You watch your opponent. He is sweating. His left arm is drooping. You will him to fail. You pray for his weakness. It was a test of willpower, but also of anatomy. A man with stronger deltoids won the lawsuit. Justice was decided by the gym routine you didn't have, but if the cross was static, the turnstile was dynamic. The turnpike again. But let's look at the turnstile itself. Originally it was a turnpike, a frame of pikes, sharpened poles on a pivot, to stop cavalry. But it became a toll gate for pedestrians. The sensory experience is the click. You put your penny in the slot, or give it to the keeper. You push the heavy wooden arm, thump click. It lets one person through. It counts you. It processes you. It turns you from a walker into a unit of revenue. It was the ancestor of the subway gate. But let's leave the road and go to the kitchen again. But not for food, for time. The turnspit clock. We talked about the dog, but the spit needed to turn at a specific speed. So they invented a governor, a fan. The hot air from the fire rose up the chimney. It hit a fan blade. The fan turned the gears turned the spit. The hotter the fire, the faster the roast turned. It was a self-regulating system, a feedback loop. It was automation powered by dinner, but the most advanced machine in the kitchen wasn't for roasting, it was for washing. The box mangle, a massive wooden box filled with stones, it sat on rollers. You put your linen sheets under the rollers, you turned a crank, the heavy box rolled back and forth over the sheets. The sensory reality is the rumble. The floor shakes, the stones grind, the linen is pressed flat, smooth, shiny. It was a steamroller for tablecloths. It took 2 people to turn the crank. It was exhausting. But it saved the cost of ironing, which required heating iron slugs in the fire. But let's move to a technology that targeted the very air you breathed, if you were a miner. The canary. We mentioned it. But the resuscitator. A device for reviving canaries. It was a glass box with a door. You put the canary inside. If it fainted, carbon monoxide, you closed the door. You opened a valve on a tank of oxygen. The sensory detail, the bird is lying on its back, feet in the air. You flush the box with oxygen. The bird twitches. It stands up. It sings. You use the same bird again. It was a life support system for a biological sensor. But if the canary detected gas, the Davy lamp prevented the explosion. Humphrey Davy, 1815. A candle inside a mesh screen. The sensory experience is the blue flame. If there is methane in the air, the flame burns blue, but it doesn't explode. The mesh absorbs the heat. The flame cannot pass through the holes to ignite the gas outside. You're walking through a bomb with a lit match protected by a piece of wire gauze. It saved thousands of lives. But it also allowed mine owners to dig deeper into more dangerous seams. Safety technology often leads to greater risk-taking. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the voice. The speaking tube. In a great house, you're a servant in the kitchen, you hear a whistle. You go to the wall, there's a brass tube, you uncork it. Tea in the drawing room, a voice says, tinny, distant. The voice has travelled through the walls, through the floors, around corners. It is the master's voice detached from his body. You answer. Yes, sir. You're speaking to the architecture. And as you stand there listening to the tube, watching the canary revive, turning the mangle, and holding your arms out in the ordeal, you realise the history of technology is the history of extending the human body. We extended our arms with the crane. We extended our eyes with the telescope. We extended our voice with the tube. But we also extended our suffering. The night is deep. The gaslight hisses. You head home. You pass the pillory. Empty. You enter your house. You bar the door. You're safe. Until tomorrow, when we go to the end of the world, or rather, the end of the Roman Empire, and the technology that died with it. Sleep well. The Roman Empire didn't end with a bang, it ended with a slow, grinding loss of knowledge. You're standing in a Roman bathhouse in the year 410 AD. The Goths are at the gates, but the real enemy is the broken pipe. The lead pipe that brings water to the bath has cracked. In 100 AD, a plumber would have come with a soldering iron and fixed it. In 410 AD, there is no plumber. The skill has been lost. The man who knew how to solder lead died of the plague, and his apprentice ran away to become a monk. The sensory reality of the Dark Ages is the cooling. The water stops flowing. The fires under the hypocaust go out. The warm marble floor turns cold. The bathhouse becomes a ruin. People steal the marble to burn for lime, to make mortar for walls. They steal the lead pipes to make weights for fishing nets. The infrastructure of civilization is cannibalized for survival. Spolia. Reusing the past. You see a peasant's hut. The cornerstone is a piece of a Roman column. The roof is held up by a statue of a god turned upside down. It is a world living in the skeleton of a giant. But some technology survived. Where? The watermill. It was simple enough to maintain, and it made bread, so it stayed. And the stirrup. It arrived from the east. A vase. It changed warfare. The sensory detail is the stability. You're on a horse. You put your foot in the iron ring. You can stand up. You can swing a sword without falling off. The shock cavalry was born. The knight. The stirrup created feudalism. Because knights were expensive, so you needed peasants to feed them. A small piece of iron changed the social structure of a continent. But let's leave the knight and go to the plough. The heavy plough, caruca. The Romans used a scratch plough, aratrum. It worked on light Mediterranean soil. But on the heavy wet clay of northern Europe, useless. The heavy plough had a coulter, knife, to cut the sod, and a mouldboard to turn it over. But it was heavy. It needed 8 oxen. No peasant had 8 oxen, so they formed cooperatives. The open field system. I have an ox. You have an ox. Let's plough together. The sensory reality is the team. You're walking in the mud. 8 massive beasts are pulling. The plough tears the earth open. It smells of wet clay and worms. It allowed Europe to feed itself. It led to the population boom. It led to the cities. It was the technology of collaboration. But if the plough created the city, the compass opened the world. We talked about the lodestone, but the dry compass, Flavio Gioia, maybe. A needle on a pin in a box. You didn't need water. You could use it in a storm. It allowed the age of discovery, but it also allowed the slave trade. The ships could go to Africa. They could go to America. The needle pointed north, but it led to the Middle Passage, the sensory horror of the hold. We talked about the sailor, but the human cargo, packed like spoons, the heat, the smell, the darkness. Technology is neutral. It can carry spices, or it can carry chains. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the very measurement of value. The touchstone. How do you know if gold is real? You rub it on a piece of dark stone, jasper. It leaves a streak. You compare the streak to a master needle, gold of known purity. The sensory detail is the rub. The merchant looks at your coin. He rubs it on the stone. Scritch. A yellow line appears. He looks at the colour. It is red, he says. Copper. Debased. You have been caught. It was a primitive spectrometer, a rock that told the truth. And as you stand there holding your debased coin, watching the heavy plough turn the earth, feeling the stirrup under your boot and seeing the Roman bath crumble into ruin, you realise history is a cycle of building and breaking. We build the aqueduct, we break the pipe, we build the plough, we exhaust the soil, we build the ship, we fill it with chains. But the night is deep. The curfew rings. You head home. You pass the pillory. Empty. You pass the stocks. Empty. You enter your house. You bar the door. You are safe until tomorrow, when we go to the future again, and the electric chair. Just kidding. Let's stick to the telegraph. Sleep well. The telegraph. It hums in the background of the 19th century, a constant low-frequency buzz that connects continents and changes the speed of thought. But while the wires sang, the pneumatic tube whispered. In London, Paris, and New York, messages weren't just sent by electricity, they were sent by air. The pneumatic. Dispatch. You are in a Victorian office. You write a note. You put it in a capsule, a gutta-percha cylinder with felt bumpers. You drop it into a brass tube in the wall. Whoosh! A vacuum sucks it away. It travels through miles of underground pipes propelled by steam-powered fans. It arrives at the exchange. It is sorted. It is sent to another tube. The sensory reality is the thump. You are waiting for a reply. The brass flap opens. The capsule arrives with a soft thud. It is warm from the friction of the pipe. It was a physical internet. A network of breath-moving information under the streets. They even tried to build a pneumatic railway. The Crystal Palace Pneumatic Railway, 1864. You sit in a carriage. It fits inside a tube. A fan blows you. The sensory experience is the wind. You're pushed by a gale. It is dark. You're moving at 30 miles per hour through a hole in the ground. It failed. Leaks. Expense. But the idea of travel by suction, it lingered. But if the tube was fast, the ice was slow. The refrigerator. Before electricity, there was the icebox, a wooden cabinet lined with zinc and sawdust. You put a block of ice in the top. The cold air sank, but the ice melted. It dripped into a pan. The sensory reality of the icebox is the overflow. You forget to empty the pan. You wake up in the morning. The kitchen floor is wet. The wood is warping, and the Iceman. He comes every day with a block of ice on his shoulder held by tongs. He is wet. He is strong. He brings the winter into your kitchen in July. It was a daily subscription to cold. But let's leave the kitchen and go to the war again. The submarine. The Turtle. 1776. David Bushnell. A wooden barrel. One man inside. Hand-cranked propeller. The sensory horror. You are underwater. It is dark. The air is running out. You're cranking a handle. You're trying to drill a hole in the hull of a British ship to plant a mine. The drill hits. Metal, copper sheathing. It won't bite. You are suffocating in a barrel, failing to blow up a ship. But the H.L. Hunley, Civil War, it sank 3 times. It killed 3 crews. They kept raising it. They kept getting back in. The sensory detail is the candle. They used a candle to test the air. If the candle went out, you had minutes to surface. They found the crew sitting at their stations. No panic. They just fell asleep. It was a coffin that moved. But let's move to a technology that targeted the voice again. The telephone. Alexander Graham Bell. Mr. Watson, come here. But the switchboard. The hello girls. You pick up the receiver. You don't dial. You talk to a woman. Operator. The sensory reality. A room full of women. The sound of 1,000 conversations. Click, clack. They plug the jacks into the board. They are the human routers of the world. They know everything. They hear the secrets. If you are rude to the operator, she disconnects you. It was a social network controlled by politeness. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the image. The magic lantern, the precursor to the cinema, a candle, a lens, a glass slide painted with a picture. The sensory experience is the phantasmagoria. You're in a dark room, smoke is pumped in. The lantern projects a ghost onto the smoke. The ghost moves, it grows, it shrinks, the crowd screams. It was the first time humans saw a moving image that wasn't alive. It was a technological haunting. And as you stand there watching the ghost in the smoke, hearing the operator connect the call, feeling the cold of the icebox and imagining the suffocation of the submarine, you realize technology is a dream we build out of matter. Sometimes it is a nightmare, but the night is deep. The gas light hisses. You head home. You pass the police box, the blue light. You enter your house. You lock the door. You're safe. Until tomorrow, when the future arrives. And it brings the automobile, but first the bicycle. Sleep well, the bicycle. It sounds innocent. A toy. But in the late 19th century, it was a revolution on 2 wheels. The penny farthing. 1 giant wheel. 1 tiny wheel. You're 5 feet in the air. The sensory reality is the header. You hit a bump. The center of gravity is too high. You flip over the handlebars. You land on your head. Taking a header. It was dangerous. It was fast. It was freedom. But then came the safety bicycle. Chain drive. Equal wheels. Pneumatic tires. Filled with air thanks to John Boyd Dunlop. Suddenly anyone could ride. Women could ride. The new woman. She wore bloomers, trousers, the sensory scandal. A woman wearing pants, riding a machine, moving faster than a horse. It changed courtship. You could ride away from your chaperone. It changed genetics. You could marry someone from the next village or the next town. The gene pool expanded because of a bike, chain. But the bicycle needed a road, a smooth road, the macadam, John Loudon macadam. He realized that big stones break wheels, but small stones, angular stones, they lock together. The sensory experience of the macadam road. It is smooth, it is hard, it drains water, the dust, the white dust of the crushed stone, it coats the hedges, it coats the travellers, but it allows speed. And then they added tar. Tarmac, the smell of hot tar, the black ribbon. The road is sealed, the bicycle paved the way for the car, but the car was loud. The red flag act. In Britain, early cars, steam carriages, had to be preceded by a man walking with a red flag. 4 miles per hour. The sensory absurdity. A machine capable of 20 millenniums crawling behind a pedestrian. It was a law designed to protect the horse, but the horse was doomed. The great horse manure crisis of 1894. Cities were drowning in manure. London, New York. The sensory horror. The smell. The flies. The dry dust. Of manure blowing in the wind. Urban planners predicted that by 1950 London would be buried under 9 feet of manure. Then the car arrived. The clean solution. No manure, just exhaust. We traded one pollution for another. We traded the smell of the stable for the smell of the refinery. But let's leave the road and go to the sky again. The Zeppelin, the airship. You're floating, silent, stable, the sensory luxury. You're in a gondola with a dining room. You look down at the ocean. But the gas, hydrogen, the Hindenburg, the sensory horror, the static spark, the fire, the skin of the ship melting. We abandoned the airship. We chose the airplane, the Wright Flyer, noisy, shaking, cold. The sensory experience is the wind. You're lying on the wing. The engine is deafening, but you are flying, not floating. Flying. It was a victory of aerodynamics over buoyancy. But let's move to a technology that targeted the food again. Canning. Napoleon needed to feed his army. Nicolas Appert invented the bottle. Peter Durand invented the tin can. But they didn't invent the can opener. For 50 years, soldiers opened cans with bayonets, with rocks, with chisels. Cut round on the top with a hammer and chisel. The sensory frustration. You are hungry. The food is inside the metal. You have to destroy the container to eat. You cut your hand on the jagged tin. It was preservation without access. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the cold again. The radiator. Steam heat. The sensory experience is the clanking. You're in a Victorian apartment. The pipes groan. The radiator hisses. Bang. Clang. It is the water hammer. Steam hitting water. The heat is dry. It dries your skin. It dries your throat. But it is heat. In every room. You don't need a fireplace. You don't need a chimney sweep. The architecture changes. The rooms get bigger. The ceilings get lower. And as you stand there, listening to the radiator clank, hearing the car horn outside, feeling the smooth tarmac under your feet, and watching the airplane cross the sky, you realize the world has become a machine that hums, honks, and hisses. But the night is deep. The streetlights are electric now. You head home, you pass the phone booth, you enter your house, you turn the lock, you are safe until tomorrow, when we look at the computer and the bug inside it. A real moth. Sleep well. The bug. It is 1947. Grace Hopper is working on the marked computer at Harvard. It is not a laptop. It is a room full of electromechanical relays. The machine stops. They check the circuits. Inside relay arm 70, panel F, they find a moth. It has been beaten to death by the relay. They tape it into the logbook. First actual case of bug being found. The sensory reality of early computing is the clack. The relays are physical switches. Clack, clack, clack. The computer sounds like 1,000 knitting needles. It smells of ozone and warm dust. The bug is a literal insect. The glitch is biological. But let's leave the moth and go back to the ancient world. Because we forgot something important. The Baghdad battery, a clay pot, a copper cylinder, an iron rod found in Iraq, Kujut Rabu. If you fill it with vinegar, it produces a voltage, 0.5 volts. What was it for? Electroplating gold? Medicine? Pain relief? Or just a magic trick for a temple? The sensory wonder. You hold the pot, you touch the rod, a tingle, electricity. 2,000 years before Franklin, or the Dendrolite, Egypt, a carving in a temple, a man holding a giant bulb, inside a snake, filament, a cord attached to a jed pillar, insulator. Is it a light bulb? Probably not. Probably a symbol of creation, lotus flower. But the resemblance, it makes you wonder. Did they have light without fire? But let's move to a technology that was definitely real, but lost. Roman, concrete, again, but the marine version. We talked about the ash, but the breakwater. They poured the concrete underwater, it set, it hardened. We still can't do that as well as they did. And Damascus steel again. But the Vikings had Ulfbert, swords made of crucible steel, pure, strong. The name Ulfbert is inlaid in the blade, a trademark. But the steel came from Iran, Afghanistan, the trade routes, the Silk Road. The Vikings were globalists, the sensory detail. A Viking in Norway holding a sword made of steel from India, paid for with silver from Baghdad. The world was smaller than we think. But let's go to the Mayan world. The rubber ball. The Maya invented rubber. They mixed latex from the tree with morning glory juice. They made balls that bounced. The sensory experience. The ball game. Pits. The ball is heavy. Solid rubber. If it hits you, it breaks ribs. You hit it with your hip. The sound. Thud. The cheer of the crowd. The losers. Sometimes sacrificed. Rubber was sacred. They made rubber sandals, waterproof capes, 3,000 years before Goodyear. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the time again. The Antiquity mechanism. We started with it. Let's finish with it. The instruction manual, they found text on the back cover. It explains how to use it. The golden little sphere. The pointer. It wasn't just a machine, it was a product. It had a user guide. The sensory tragedy. The bronze corroding at the bottom of the sea. The wood rotting, the knowledge dissolving into the salt water. It took a diver in 1901 to find it. A storm, a shipwreck. If that ship hadn't sunk, the mechanism would have been melted down for scrap. The shipwreck saved the technology by destroying it. And as you stand there, holding the rubber ball, feeling the tingle of the battery, hearing the clack of the relay, and reading the ghost text on the bronze gear, you realize the past is not. Past is primitive. It is just forgotten. But the night is deep. The computer is humming. The screen is glowing. You are safe until tomorrow. When we look at the future of the past and the things we are building now that will be lost tech in 1,000 years, or maybe just the space pen. Wait, we did the space pen. How about the nuclear waste warning? This place is not a place of honor. We are building monuments to warn the future about our poison. Sleep well. The warning. It is designed to last 10,000 years. We are trying to talk to people who might not speak English, might not understand radiation, might not even be human. This is not a place of honor. No highly esteemed deed is commemorated here. Nothing valued is here. We are building landscape of thorns, giant concrete spikes jutting out of the desert, menacing, unnatural, the sensory reality of the future. You're a wanderer in the year 12,000. You see the spikes. They are weathered, grey, ominous. The wind howls through them. Do you stay away, or do you dig? Curiosity killed the cat. But curiosity also built the pyramid. It is a monument to our fear of our own legacy. But let's leave the future and go back to the present of the past, to the Victorian sewer, the Tosher again. But let's look at the flush toilet. Thomas Crapper. He didn't invent it, but he popularized the valveless water waste preventer. The sensory experience of the flush. You pull the chain, the water rushes, whoosh, the waste disappears instantly. Where does it go? Ideally, to the treatment plant, but in heavy rain? Combined sewer overflow. It goes into the river. We are still polluting the Thames, just faster. But the toilet brought privacy. The water closet. A room with a lock. For the first time in history, you could be truly alone. But let's move to a technology that targeted the pain again. Heroin. Bayer, the same company that made aspirin. They sold heroin as a cough suppressant for children. Non-addictive. The sensory reality, the soothing syrup, the calm, the addiction. It took years to realize the mistake. We created a monster in a bottle. But let's go to the light again. The neon sign, Georges Claude. He took a tube of gas, he electrified it. It glowed red. Liquid fire. The sensory experience of the neon city. Tokyo, Las Vegas. The hum of the transformers. The flickering light reflected in the rain. It is the color of the modern night. But neon is rare. We use LEDs now. We lost the hum. We lost the warmth. We traded soul for efficiency. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the very measurement of the self. The fingerprint. Francis Galton. Edward Henry. Before, you were your name, or your scar, or your brand, T for thief. Now, you're the pattern on your skin. The sensory detail is the ink. You press your finger onto the pad, then onto the paper. The whorls, the loops, the arches. You are unique, but you're also catalogued. The Bertillon system, measuring the body. The police measure your head, your ears, your arms. You're a data point in a file. And as you stand there, looking at your inky finger, watching the neon sign flicker, hearing the flush of the toilet and reading the warning on the nuclear waste, you realize we are building a world of data, waste and light. But the night is deep. The neon buzzes. You head home. You pass the CCTV camera. You enter your house. You turn the lock. You're safe until tomorrow, when we go back to Rome and the lead pipe and why the water tasted so sweet. Sleep well. The water tasted sweet. It was one of the great luxuries of Rome. After a long day in the Forum under the beating sun, you could turn a tap, a bronze valve, and cool water would flow. But that sweetness wasn't just freshness. It was chemistry. Lead acetate. The pipes were made of lead. The word plumbing comes from the Latin plumbum, lead. The symbol Pb, water flowing through lead, picks up ions. Lead ions taste sweet. The Romans boiled grape juice in lead pots to make sappa, a syrup used to sweeten wine. The sensory reality is the slow poison. You drink the cool water, it is delicious. But your joints start to ache. You get the gout. You become irritable. The emperor becomes paranoid. Some historians argue that lead poisoning contributed to the fall of the empire. The ruling class, who had the most plumbing and drank the most sweetened wine, slowly went mad. They drank their own decline from a golden goblet. But if the water was poisoned, the air was masterfully engineered. The Hippocaust again. But let's look at the fuel. To heat the bathhouses, the Romans deforested Italy. They burned entire forests. The smoke from the Hippocaust furnaces had to go somewhere. It went up chimneys, but it also hung over the city. Rome had smog. Gravioris caeli, heavy, heaven. Seneca complained about the stink of the smoky chimneys. You walk through Rome, your toga turns grey, you cough up soot. The cleanest city in the ancient world was also one of the dirtiest. But let's leave the city and go to the legion, the pilum, the Roman javelin. It wasn't just a spear, it was designed to break. The sensory experience of the pilum. The soldier throws it. It hits the enemy's shield. It pierces the wood, but the shank is made of soft iron. The weight of the shaft bends the iron. Now the enemy has a 6-foot bent spear sticking out of his shield. He can't use the shield. It is too heavy, too awkward. He has to throw it away. He is defenseless. The Roman legionary draws his gladius, short sword. Stab. It was a weapon designed to disable defense, a single-use tool of tactical brilliance. But the legion needed roads, the via. We talked about the layers, but the milestones, miliarium, every mile a stone pillar. It told you how far to the next city, and who built the road. Built by Emperor Trajan, the sensory reality is the rhythm you march, 1 mile, stone, 1 mile, stone. It turns the landscape into a grid. You know exactly where you are in the empire. You are never lost, but you are never free. But let's move to a technology that targeted the mind, the wax tablet again, but the school, the Roman schoolroom. The teacher sits in a chair, cathedra. The students sit on benches. They scratch their letters into the wax if they make a mistake. The ferula, a wooden rod. The teacher hits their knuckles. The sensory detail is the sting. The wax tablet clatters to the floor, the hand throbs. Education was beaten into you. A man who has not been flogged has not been educated. It was a pedagogy of pain. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the soul, the lararium, the household shrine. Every Roman house had a small altar, statues of the lares, household gods, and the penates, gods of the pantry. You offered them food, a pinch of salt, a piece of cake. The sensory experience is the presence. You are never alone. The gods are watching you eat. They are watching you sleep. If you ignore them, bad luck. The milk sours. The roof leaks. You live with invisible roommates who demand snacks. And as you stand there, holding the bent pielum, tasting the sweet water, feeling the sting of the ferula, and watching the candle burn on the lararium, you realize the Romans engineered everything. The water, the road, the war, the gods. But they couldn't engineer eternity. The night is deep. The vigiles are shouting. Fire! You head home. You pass the insula. It is burning. You enter your house. You offer a cake to the lares. You're safe until tomorrow, when we go to the Silk Road and the secret of the worm. Sleep well. The Silk Road isn't a road. It is a network of dust, camels, and secrets. And the biggest, secret of all, is a worm. For centuries, Rome poured its gold into China to buy silk. They loved it. It was light, shimmering, translucent. It felt like woven water on the skin. But they had no idea how it was made. Pliny the Elder thought it grew on trees. Wool of the forests. But you, the Chinese sericulture farmer, know the truth. The sensory reality of silk is the crunch. You stand in the rearing house. It is warm, humid. Trays of silkworms are stacked to the ceiling. Millions of them. They are eating mulberry leaves. The sound is deafening. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Like the sound of heavy rain hitting a roof. It is the sound of voracious industrial consumption. You feed them day and night. If they stop eating, the silk is ruined. When they spin their cocoons, the real work begins. You boil them. The sensory horror. You throw the living cocoons into boiling water. The heat kills the pupa inside. It dissolves the sericin, the gum. You find the end of the thread. You pull. One cocoon unravels into a single thread a mile long. You're unwinding a coffin to make a dress for an empress. But the secret couldn't last forever. 2 Nestorian monks. They came to China. They saw the worms, and they had a plan. They hollowed out their bamboo walking sticks. They hid the eggs inside. The sensory tension. Walking thousands of miles across the desert. If the guards check the sticks, death. If the eggs get too cold, death. If the eggs hatch too soon, death. They walked the industrial secret of the ancient world out of China in a cane. They brought it to Byzantium. The Emperor Justinian started his own silk industry. The monopoly was broken by 2 men taking a long walk. But if the Chinese invented silk, they also invented flying money, paper currency, jiaozi. You're a merchant in the Song dynasty. You have heavy strings of iron coins. They are annoying, so you deposit them. You get a piece of paper. The sensory experience is the weightlessness. You hold the paper note. It is light. It rustles. It is stamped with red ink. But read the fine print. Counterfeiters will be beheaded. It is a promise of value backed by the threat of decapitation. But let's leave the money and go to the fire. The fire drug. Huoyao. Gunpowder. Taoist alchemists were looking for the elixir of life. They mixed saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal. They heated it. Boom. They burned down their laboratory. They didn't find immortality. They found the opposite. The sensory reality of early gunpowder weapons. The fire lance. A bamboo tube filled with powder and shrapnel. You light the fuse. A jet of flame shoots out. It burns the enemy. It blinds them. It smells of sulfur and burnt bamboo. It was the grandfather of the gun, a flamethrower made of grass. But the most sophisticated machine wasn't a weapon, it was a navigator. The south-pointing chariot. It didn't use a magnet, it used gears, a differential gear, system. There is a figure on top of the chariot, it points south. As the chariot turns, the gears turn the figure in the opposite direction. The sensory detail is the click. You turn the chariot left. The gears whir. The figure rotates right. It stays pointing south. It is mechanical navigation. Dead reckoning. It works perfectly as long as the wheels don't slip. If you hit mud, the machine gets confused. It was a computer made of wood, defeated by a puddle. But let's move to a technology that targeted the health again. Acupuncture, but specifically the Bronze Man. In the Song Dynasty, they used a life-sized bronze statue to test medical students. The statue had holes at the acupuncture points. It was covered in wax to hide the holes. It was filled with water or mercury. The student had to find the point by feel. He pushed the needle in. If he was right, water squirted out. The sensory experience. You are the student. You are sweating. You press the needle. Through the wax. You pray for the leak. It was a medical exam that splashed you if you passed. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the earth. The deep bore. The Chinese drilled for salt and natural gas, using bamboo rigs. They drilled 2,000 feet down. How? Percussion drilling. A heavy iron bit on a bamboo cable. You jump on a lever. The bit lifts. You jump off. The bit falls. Crash. You do this for years. The sensory reality is the rhythm, the thud of the bit, the creak of the bamboo derrick. When they hit gas, they piped it through bamboo tubes to boil the salt. They were fracking in the 11th century. And as you stand there, watching the fire lance burn, holding the flying money, hearing the crunch of the silkworms and feeling the vibration of the drill, you realize the East was building the future while the West was still figuring out how to build a chimney. But the night is deep. The curfew rings. You head home. You pass the pillory. A counterfeiter is there. He printed fake flying money. You pass the stocks. Empty. You enter your house. You bar the door. You're safe until tomorrow. When we go to the library, but not just any library, the Library of Alexandria, and what was actually in it, sleep well. The Library of Alexandria. It is not a quiet building with librarians shushing you. It is a factory of knowledge, humming with the sound of copying. You're walking through the colonnades, the air is dry, smelling of the sea, the harbour is right there, and the overwhelming scent of papyrus, dried reeds, glue, ink. But how did they get the books? The ship fund. By law, any ship docking in Alexandria had to surrender its books. The sensory reality is the seizure. You are a captain. You have a rare copy of a Greek tragedy. The harbour officials board your ship. They don't look for gold, they look for scrolls. Confiscated, they say. They take the scroll to the library. The scribes copy it, then they give you the copy, they keep the original. The Galen scam. You have been robbed of your intellectual property by the government. The library is a monument to state-sponsored theft, but inside the scholars are measuring the universe. Eratosthenes. He puts a stick in the ground. The sensory detail is the shadow. At noon, on the summer solstice, he measures the shadow cast by the stick in Alexandria. He knows that in Syene, Aswan, there is no shadow. He pays a bematist, a professional walker, to walk from Alexandria to Syene. The walker counts his steps, 1, 2, 3, thousands of miles. He paces out the curvature of the earth. Eratosthenes calculates the circumference of the planet. He is off by less than 2%. He did it with a stick and a walker. But let's leave the library and go to the harbour, the Syracusa, the Titanic of antiquity, designed by Archimedes. It was so big it had a gymnasium, a library and a garden on the deck. The sensory experience is the vertigo. You stand on the dock. The ship towers over you. It has 8 towers for archers. It has a catapult, but it leaked. Archimedes invented the Archimedes screw, a giant corkscrew inside a pipe. You turn the crank. The water travels up the screw, it pumps out the bilge. The ship was too big to dock in most ports. It sailed once to Egypt and was abandoned. A white elephant of the sea. But if the ship was excessive, the cloth was extortionate. Tyrian purple, the colour of emperors. It came from a snail, the murex. The sensory reality of the dye works. You are miles away from the city of Tyre, but you can smell it. Rotting shellfish. They crushed the snails, they let them ferment in lead vats. To dye one robe took 10,000 snails. The stench of power. If you wore purple, you smelled faintly of fish guts. But no one said anything, because you were the emperor. It was a colour that announced you were above the sense of smell. But the Romans had another fabric, one that didn't rot. Asbestos. Salamander wool. They mined it. They wove it into napkins, the sensory trick. You are at a banquet. The guest spills wine on the napkin. The host throws the napkin into the fire. The guests gasp, but the napkin doesn't burn. It glows red. The wine stain burns off. The host pulls it out with tongs. It is white. Clean. Magic, they say. It is cancer. The fibres are entering their lungs. Charlemagne reportedly had an asbestos tablecloth to impress barbarian kings. We used a carcinogen as a party trick, but let's move to a technology that targeted the time again. The water clock, clepsydra. In the Roman court, lawyers talked too much, so they timed them. A clay bowl with a hole in the bottom. Water dripped out. The sensory experience is the drip. Plop, plop, plop. The lawyer is shouting. The water is falling. When the bowl is empty, he has to stop. Running out of water. Running out of time. But sometimes they cheated. They put mud in the water to make it drip slower. Or they used muddy rhetoric. It was a fluid regulation of speech. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the very soil. The kanat again. But the ice pit. Yakchal. In the Persian desert, a giant conical mud brick dome. Inside, a deep pit. They brought ice from the mountains in winter. They stored it. The sensory reality. It is 110 degrees outside. You walk into the Yakchal. The temperature drops 60 degrees in 10 steps. It is a cathedral of cold. You eat faluda. Frozen noodles with rose water. In the middle of the desert, it defied the sun. And as you stand there, eating the frozen noodles, watching the purple robe dry, smelling the rotting snails and hearing the water clock drip, you realize the ancient world was a place of extreme contrasts. The heat of the desert and the ice of the pit. The stench of the dye and the beauty of the colour. But the night is deep, the library is closed, or burning, depending on the year. You head home, you pass the lighthouse, the pharaohs, the mirror on top reflects the firelight for 30 miles. You enter your house, you bar the door, you're safe, until tomorrow, when the alchemist arrives, and he thinks he can make gold out of urine, phosphorus. Sleep well. The alchemist arrives, but he isn't holding gold. He's holding a flask that glows in the dark. It is 1669, in Hamburg. Hennig Brand is trying to create the philosopher's stone. He is convinced, through a logic known only to alchemists, that gold can be extracted from human urine because they are both yellow. He collects 500 gallons of urine. He lets it rot until it smells terrible. He boils it down to a paste. He heats the paste at a terrifyingly high temperature, and then the retort glows. It isn't gold. It is a waxy white substance that bursts into flames when exposed to air. Phosphorus, the light bearer. The sensory reality of the discovery is the cold fire. The laboratory is dark. The flask shines with a pale green light. It doesn't need a wick. It is light itself, trapped in matter. Brand uses it to impress his friends. He writes with it on the wall. The letters glow, but it burns. Phosphorus burns are deep, chemical, agonizing. We eventually used it for matches, lucifers, and for bombs. Brand was looking for wealth and found a weapon. But let's leave the glowing urine and go to the wind again. The fan. Not the punker. The winnowing fan. To separate wheat from chaff, you threw it in the air. The wind blew the chaff away. But what if there was no wind? The Chinese invented the rotary winnowing fan. A crank, a wooden box, a fan blade inside. You pour the grain. You turn the crank. The sensory detail is the artificial gale. The fan blows a steady stream of air. The chaff flies out the end. The grain falls straight down. It is second century BC technology. Europe didn't get it until the 18th century. We spent 2,000 years waiting for the wind when we could have built it. But if the wind was useful, the vacuum was powerful. The Magdeburg hemispheres, Otto von Guericke, 1654. He takes 2 copper hemispheres. He puts them together. He pumps the air out. The sensory spectacle. He hitches 16 horses to the hemispheres, 8 on each side. They pull. The horses strain. Their hooves dig into the dirt. The ropes creak. But the hemispheres don't separate. Why? The weight of the atmosphere. 14 pounds per square inch. The crowd gasps. They are seeing the power of nothingness. The horror of the vacuum. But let's move to a technology that targeted the distance. The semaphore, the optical telegraph. Claude Chappe, France, 1792. Towers on hills. On top of each tower a mast with pivoting arms. The sensory experience. You are a telescope operator. You watch the distant hill. The arms move. Up, down, angle. You copy the shape. The message travels from Paris to Lille in minutes. The king is dead. It is a mechanical twitter, but it relies on the weather. If it is foggy, the network crashes. It was the internet of the eye. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the deep. The diving bell, Edmund Halley. A wooden bell weighted with lead. You lower it into the water. The air stays trapped inside, but the air gets stale, so he sends down barrels of fresh air. Refreshment. The sensory reality. You're sitting on a bench at the bottom of the Thames. It is dark, green. You're breathing air that was sent down in a keg. The pressure makes your voice sound high and squeaky. Like a duck, Halley wrote. You're an explorer of the deep, sounding like a cartoon character. And as you stand there, watching the semaphore arms wave, feeling the suction of the vacuum, hearing the squeaky voice of the diver, and seeing the glow of the phosphorus, you realize science is just magic that we figured out how to repeat. But the night is deep. The gaslight hisses. You head home. You pass the pillory. Empty. You enter your house. You bar the door. You are safe until tomorrow, when the future arrives, and it brings the daguerreotype. The mirror with a memory. Sleep well, the daguerreotype. It sits on a velvet cushion, a small copper plate coated in silver. You hold it in your hand. It is heavy. To see the image, you have to tilt it just right, catching the light. If you angle it one way, it is a negative, a ghostly mirror of shadows. Angle it the other, and a face appears. It is 1839. Louis Daguerre has frozen time, but the sensory reality of sitting for a portrait is torture. You enter the studio. It smells of iodine, bromine, and mercury vapour, a toxic cloud that will eventually drive the photographer mad. The roof is glass to let in the sun. It is hot. The photographer sits you in a chair. He adjusts the head, clamp, an iron stand behind your neck. 2 metal prongs grip the base of your skull. Do not move, he commands, for 15 minutes. You stare at the lens. Your eyes water. You cannot blink. You cannot smile. Which is why Victorians always look grim. It takes too much muscle energy to hold a smile for 20 minutes. A fly lands on your nose. You cannot swat it. You are a statue of flesh. When the plate is developed, you see yourself. But it is the you of 20 minutes ago. A ghost trapped in silver. It was a technology that stole the soul by clamping the neck. But if the camera captured the past, the engine calculated the future. The difference engine, or the analytical engine. Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace. You're standing in a workshop in London. You're looking at a machine the size of a locomotive. It is made of 25,000 brass parts. Gears, levers, cogs, cams. The sensory detail is the click. The machine is hand-cranked. Click, clack, whir. It is doing math. It is calculating polynomials. But how do you tell it what to do? The punch card, borrowed from the jacquard loom, which wove patterns in silk. You hold a stiff card with holes punched in it. The sensory reality. You feed the card into the brass slot. The machine reads the hole as a 0 and the solid card as a 1. It is binary code in 1840. But the machine was never finished. The government cut the funding. Babbage was too difficult. The brass was too expensive. The future of computing sat gathering dust in a shed for 100 years, a mechanical brain that never woke up because the bureaucracy wouldn't pay the electric bill, or rather the steam bill. But let's leave the workshop and go to the executioner's square. Because while Babbage was calculating, Dr. Guillotin was engineering. The guillotine. It was designed to be humane, a product of the Enlightenment. Equality in death. No more messy axes, no more breaking wheels, just a machine. The sensory reality is the breeze. You are the condemned. You're strapped to the bascule, the tilting board. You're slid forward. Your neck is in the lunette, the wooden collar. You look down into the basket. It is full of sawdust, to soak up the blood. You hear the latch release. Click. Then, a rushing sound. Whoosh! The blade is heavy, it falls in a groove, it is weighted with lead. You feel a cool breeze on your neck a fraction of a second before the impact. It was efficient. Too efficient. It made execution industrial. You could process 100 aristocrats in an hour. Technology had streamlined death. But let's move to a technology that tried to cheat death, or at least decay, the refrigerated ship, the SS Dunedin, 1882. You're a sailor. You're carrying a cargo of sheep from New Zealand to London, but the sheep are dead. The hold is filled with a Bell-Coleman machine, compressed air. The sensory experience is the Arctic. You walk into the hold. It is freezing. Your breath hangs in the air, the sheep are frozen solid. They knock together like rocks. Thud, thud. The machine is loud. It runs on steam. It leaks ammonia. But when you arrive in London, the meat is fresh. You have shrunk the world. You can eat a lamb chop that died 3 months ago on the other side of the planet. It changed the diet of the empire. The poor could eat meat, but it also killed the local farmer. The corn laws were gone. The global market had arrived in a frozen block. But let's end this section with a technology that targeted the voice again. The radio. Marconi. Tesla. The coherer. A tube of metal filings. The sensory detail is the static. You put on the headphones. You listen to the white noise of the universe. Hiss. Crackle. And then a voice, or a Morse code beep. It is coming from a ship at sea, or a tower in Paris. It is a voice without a body travelling through the ether. People thought it was spirits. They held seances next to radios. Is that you, grandmother? No, it is the shipping forecast. And as you stand there, listening to the static, smelling the ammonia of the fridge ship, hearing the drop of the guillotine blade, and holding the heavy daguerreotype, you realise we spent thousands of years trying to extend our senses, to see further, to hear further, to keep food longer, and we succeeded. But in doing so, we built a world that is loud, cold, and crowded with ghosts. But the night is deep. The gaslights are hissing. You head home. You pass the pneumatic tube station. A capsule thuds into the bin. You enter your house. You turn the key. You are safe. Until tomorrow, when the final part of our journey arrives, the end of the list, and the realization that we are just the medieval peasants of the future. Sleep well. The gas lamp flickers and dies. The hum of the Victorian factory fades into the distance. The click of the telegraph stops. The Roman water wheel slows to a halt. You are back in your own room. The year is now. You look at the device in your hand, a rectangle of black glass. It is the obsidian mirror of the Aztecs. It is the Venetian glass of the Renaissance. It is the tabula of the Roman schoolboy. It holds the Mappa Mundi, the map of the world. It holds the bestiary, videos of cats. It holds the exchequer, your banking app. And you realise the final truth of our journey. We are just the medieval peasants of the future. We don't pay the hearth tax, but we pay the standing charge on our gas bill. We don't pay the window tax, but we pay premium rent for a view. We don't pay the multure to the miller, but we pay the service fee to the delivery app. The names change, the technology changes, but the dynamic remains. We are still building aqueducts, but now they carry fibre optics instead of water. And like the Romans, we don't know how to fix them if they break. We are still eating adulterated bread, but now it is ultra-processed food filled with preservatives instead of chalk. We are still fighting the miasma, but now we call it pollution, or carbon. We are still buying indulgences, but now they are carbon offsets. We are still beating the bounds, but now we do it with GPS and satellites. The history of technology isn't a straight line up, it is a spiral. We circle the same problems: hunger, cold, distance, memory, control, and we invent new tools to solve them. Sometimes we succeed. The Roman concrete still stands. The Antiquity mechanism still calculates. Sometimes we fail. The lead pipe poisons us. The radium paint burns us. The plastic chokes the ocean like the great stink choked the Thames. But tonight, you don't have to solve these problems. You don't have to build a pyramid. You don't have to catch a leech. You don't have to calculate the curvature of the earth with a stick. You have done the work. You have walked the salt way. You have climbed the spiral staircase. You have crossed the grass bridge. The labour is finished. The curfew bell is ringing one last time. But it is a gentle bell. A bell that says, rest. The watchman has gone home. The spy has stopped listening. The tax collector has closed his book. You're in your box bed, but it is soft. It is warm. There are no fleas. There is no smoke. You are safe. The machine of history has stopped turning for the night. The gears are still. The steam has vented. You are free to drift, to float away from the stone, away from the iron, away from the data, into the quiet, into the dark, into the sleep of the just. The ledger is closed. Good night.